Hey guys, tonight we drift into the golden hush of ancient Nubia, a land where the sun doesn't just rise, it announces itself like a diva stepping onto stage, and every grain of sand seems to hum with the memory of forgotten travelers. You find yourself standing on the edge of the desert at dawn, where the horizon trembles in heat, even before the day begins. And just so you know, you probably wouldn't survive here. Between the scorpions, the relentless sun, and the way the air seems to drink the moisture right off your skin, it's basically nature's way of saying, please leave before lunch. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sound you notice is not the wind, but the faint whisper of sand shifting across the surface of the earth. It's quiet but constant, like nature's own white noise machine. The dunes roll outward in rippling gold, and each ridge catches the sun in a different shade of warmth. You walk slowly, feeling the morning chill still clinging to the air before it gives way to the day's heat. The sand beneath your feet feels alive, a fluid kind of earth that seems to flow rather than crumble. Somewhere in the distance, a camel bell rings, one lonely chime echoing over miles of emptiness. You walk toward the sound. The air smells faintly metallic, maybe from the trace of gold dust carried by wind from forgotten mines. Ancient Nubia was famous for that. The gold of the pharaohs didn't just come from Egypt. Much of it shimmered first beneath these sands, dug from dry riverbeds by people whose names were lost to the dunes. Historians still debate just how much of Egypt's treasure actually came from Nubian soil. But let's just say, the math isn't in Egypt's favor. As you walk, your shadow stretches long behind you. You imagine what it must have been like thousands of years ago. Traders making their way north with camel trains, heavy with ivory, ebony, and salt. The trail you follow now could easily have been part of that ancient route, connecting the kingdom of Kush with Egypt. Back then, this wasn't a forgotten desert. It was a highway of life, commerce, and power. If you listen carefully, you might almost hear the rhythm of the old caravans, the crunch of hooves, the murmur of traders negotiating under linen tents, the laughter of children chasing each other with small clay toys shaped like gazelles. The sun lifts higher. You can feel the day thickening, the sky bleaching from amber to pale gold. A hawk circles overhead, riding invisible currents. You find a cluster of rocks where the wind has carved shallow hollows. Sitting there, you brush your fingers against the surface. It's warm already, like stone that remembers yesterday's heat. In the hollow, something glints faintly, a shard of pottery, painted once in red and black. You trace its curve, realizing it might have belonged to a vessel used for water or offerings. The paint lines are delicate, faded, but still visible after centuries. It's strange how color survives where people don't. A soft breeze carries the scent of acacia, sharp, resinous, like something between honey and smoke. You glance westward, where a few wiry trees cling to life near a dry wadi. Beneath their shade, small shapes move. Goats, a herder wrapped in pale linen, and two children with wooden bowls balanced on their heads. When they notice you, they wave, because apparently even in 2000 BCE, hospitality was a thing. You wave back, and the herder calls out something friendly in a language that sounds like singing. The children giggle, then run ahead, leaving small prints in the sand. You walk with them to the edge of their camp. It's humble but vivid. Woven mats, clay pots arranged carefully, a small fire crackling with thorny branches. The smell of smoke mixes with milk simmering in a blackened pot. The herder gestures for you to sit, offering a bowl. You accept. The milk tastes rich, almost buttery, with a faint tang of the desert's dryness. It's not cappuccino, but it's comfort. He points to a curved ridge on the horizon and speaks a word you almost recognize, Napata. The sacred mountain of Gebel Barkal stands there, its flat summit slicing the sky like the edge of a god's table. That's where the kings of Kush ruled. Pharaohs came to bow there. Even long after they claimed to have conquered Nubia, you sip quietly, thinking about how power shifts like sand. One day a conqueror, the next a pilgrim. The herder's wife hums softly while shaping clay between her palms. The rhythmic motion draws you in, slow, circular, hypnotic. She presses her thumb into the clay and carves a line with a reed. When she finishes, she hands you the shape, a small bird, its wings outstretched. For the wind, she says, and you nod, though you don't fully understand. It feels right, though. In this world, everything seems to have a purpose shaped by patience. As midday approaches, the desert glows white. Heat trembles above the dunes like liquid glass. The herder's family takes shelter in their tent, and you lie just outside, half in shade, half in light. You can hear the sound of insects, faint clicks and buzzes, and the low hum of the wind brushing fabric. It's so quiet that your own heartbeat feels like part of the landscape. You almost drift to sleep, but then from somewhere deep in the sand comes another sound, a low, hollow tone like a whispering drum. You sit up. The herder smiles, tapping his knee. Old voice, he says. Earth remembers. He gestures toward the dunes, explaining that when the wind moves through certain hollows, it creates a resonance. The desert literally sings. Modern scientists call them booming dunes, but the people here always knew. It's the voice of the ancestors. You close your eyes and listen. The sound deepens, a long trembling hum that rises and fades like a sigh from beneath the earth. It's eerie, beautiful, and oddly comforting, like the planet exhaling after a long day. Somewhere in the distance, you think you hear faint percussion. Drumming, maybe? You walk toward it, drawn by the rhythm. As you crest another dune, the sound grows clearer. A small group of travelers has gathered around a campfire. They wear linen robes dyed in earthy reds and ochres. Their faces glisten with sweat and smoke, and their laughter cuts through the heat like cool water. You approach cautiously, and one of them waves you over, calling out in a friendly tone that translates roughly to, "Come join." Stranger, they're celebrating something. Perhaps the safe end of a trading journey, or maybe the beginning of one. A man plucks at a stringed instrument, something like an early harp. Another taps a drum shaped from hollowed wood and stretched hide. The rhythm feels ancient, almost mathematical, yet so human you could sway to it without thinking. You sit beside them, sharing bread baked under sand and small figs dried by the sun. The air smells of sweat, fire, and fruit, raw life condensed into scent. One of the travelers tells you a story, a myth about the god Amun taking the form of a great bird to cross the desert unseen. His feathers, they say, were like polished gold, and where he rested, the ground became fertile. The people of Nubia believed that when ostriches ran across the dunes, they carried fragments of Amun's blessing in their plumage. You listen, the fire crackling beside you, and wonder if maybe that's where it all began. The fascination with the great eggs, smooth and luminous, painted to hold divine protection. But that's a story for later. As night finally leans over the horizon, the temperature drops fast, from oven to freezer in about 10 minutes flat. The sky blooms with stars, thick and bright enough to cast shadows. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like spilled salt. You lie back on your mat, staring up, and you realize why ancient Nubians thought of gods as beings of light. Out here, darkness doesn't feel empty. It feels full heavy with unseen life. The desert is never truly silent. Even now you hear the rustle of wind, the shuffle of sand grains, the distant bark of a jackal somewhere beyond sight. A traveler points to the stars, tracing with his finger. This, he says, is the river above. The celestial Nile, they called it, the reflection of the earthly river that shaped their world. When one flooded, so did the other. He laughs, noticing your puzzled look. As above, so below, he adds. You nod, pretending to understand cosmic hydrology while mostly just admiring the view. He hands you a small object, a fragment of shell, smooth and pale. Egg of the bird of dawn, he murmurs. It glows faintly in the firelight, curved and delicate. The surface feels cool even in the heat. You turn it over, imagining the hands that once painted on such shells. Maybe long before writing, long before memory. The fire dwindles. The drumming fades into silence. One by one, the travelers drift off to sleep beneath blankets of woven reeds. You stay awake a little longer, listening to the night. A beetle scurries across your mat, dragging a piece of straw twice its size. You admire the determination, a creature with no audience but the moon, working like its tiny world depends on it. In a way it does. Somewhere beyond the dunes, lightning flickers, silent, distant, painting the horizon with ghostly blue veins. You think about time, about how many nights have looked exactly like this one, millennia of sky and sand repeating in perfect patience. You exhale, feeling small but peaceful. Maybe the desert's secret isn't survival, it's acceptance. Everything here exists by yielding, by being slow, by letting go of the day's heat when the night comes. You close your eyes, but the desert keeps whispering. The dunes murmur like soft fabric shifting, and the faint hum beneath your mat rises again, that low booming voice of the earth. The herder's words echo in your memory. Old voice, Thirth remembers. The sound seeps into your breathing, syncing with your heartbeat, until it's impossible to tell where the world ends and you begin. And as you drift between waking and dream, you imagine following that whisper down into the sand, into the layers of memory, of buried color and painted shells waiting for light again. Tomorrow, you'll follow the Nile's curve southward, where the green banks shimmer with life, and the river tells its own version of history. But for now, the desert sings softly to you. Not a warning, not a mystery, just a lullaby made of sand, wind, and time. The first thing you notice when you leave the desert behind is sound. The world no longer hums in whispers, it breathes. You hear frogs gossiping from unseen puddles, the gentle slap of water against reed boats, and a bird making the same note over and over, as if rehearsing for a concert that no one else got invited to. After so much sand, the sight of the Nile feels like a miracle with good lighting. You stand at the edge of the river where it curves southward like a lazy serpent. The air is thicker here, humid, heavy, and sweet. You can almost taste green. The reeds sway, brushing each other with soft rustling that sounds suspiciously like gossip. The breeze carries hints of mud, flowers, and something faintly fishy, the perfume of every river since time began. You crouch, touch the water. It's cool, startlingly alive. The surface ripples around your fingers, catching shards of sunlight. A dragonfly hovers nearby, its wings like slivers of stained glass. You watch it hang there, trembling in place, then dart off, as if it has somewhere terribly important to be. Probably late for a meeting with the Papyrus Council. On the opposite bank, a cluster of huts leans toward the water. Smoke rises from small fires, curling lazily into the pale morning sky. You cross by stepping into a narrow reed boat. The ferryman doesn't speak at first. He's too focused on maneuvering through the gentle current with a pole longer than a spear. His skin gleams bronze under the sun, and his eyes squint with that quiet authority only people who live by rivers seem to have. Heading south? He asks finally, his voice low like gravel soaked in honey. You nod. He chuckles. Everyone says that. Few mean it. You grin, trying to sound confident. Maybe I just like the view. He snorts, amused. The river sees everything. Careful what it shows you. The boat slides forward. The current here moves slower than you expect, thick with silt and stories. The water reflects the sky like polished stone. On the banks, children wade knee-deep, tossing pebbles and laughing in that universal language that sounds exactly the same in every century. You wave. They wave back, giggling before returning to their game. As you drift downstream, you pass fields where farmers bend over shallow furrows. The shadoufs, those ancient wooden irrigation levers, rise and dip in rhythm like sleepy cranes drinking. Each scoop of water gleams for a second in the sun before falling back into the ditches. You watch mesmerized. It's agriculture as choreography. The ferryman taps the edge of the boat with his pole. They say the Nile has two hearts, he murmurs. One for Egypt, one for Nubia. When it floods too much, one is jealous. You smile. That's one way to describe seasonal cycles. He smirks. You talk like a scribe. Be careful. The river doesn't like overthinkers. He's not wrong. The rhythm of the water pulls at you, steady, hypnotic. The world slows to its own heartbeat. Even the air moves differently, thick but lazy, as if time here decided to take a nap. The banks change as you continue south. The desert gold turns to lush green. Reeds give way to groves of palm and sycamore. You spot ibises strutting along the shore, too proud for their own good, and crocodiles lounging in the sun like bloated aristocrats. One of them blinks slowly at you. You blink back, trying to look equally unbothered. Eventually, the ferryman docks near a small settlement. He nods once, refusing payment. The river gives. Don't insult it by paying twice. You thank him, stepping onto muddy ground that squelches under your sandals. Warm water seeps between your toes. It's somehow both gross and grounding, like shaking hands with the earth itself. The village here hums with life. Women weave baskets under the shade of palm leaves. Men haul nets heavy with glistening fish. The air smells like smoke, water, and roasted grains. A boy runs past you carrying a pot nearly bigger than himself, shouting something about beer. You briefly consider following him, purely for research purposes, of course. A woman waves you over. Her eyes are sharp but kind, the kind of gaze that could spot a lie from a mile away. "Traveler," she says, handing you a piece of flatbread. "You're far from the sands." "I'm following the river," you reply, taking a bite. The bread is smoky, chewy, with a faint taste of sesame. She nods. "Then you're walking with gods." The Nile listens, you swallow, smiling. "That's comforting," she laughs in a sound like rippling water. "Not always," you glance around. Every direction seems alive. Cattle lowing near the water, birds bursting from the reeds, laughter echoing from somewhere behind the huts. It's overwhelming in a gentle way, like being hugged by humidity and history at the same time. As the day warms, the villagers gather near the bank. You follow, curious. Someone's pounding a drum, deep and slow. The crowd parts slightly, revealing a group of men dragging a large wooden barge toward the water. Upon it rests something draped in linen, gleaming faintly beneath the cloth. You realize what this is. A ritual for Hapi, the god of the Nile's flood. They lower the object to an offering chest into the water. The villagers chant, their voices blending with the rhythm of the drum. The air vibrates. This ritual, you realize, is no performance. It's gratitude. The Nile's flood wasn't just an event. It was life itself. The yearly inundation, rising from the south around midsummer, brought silt, fertility, and renewal. Without it, no kingdom could have existed. Not Egypt, not Nubia. A small girl tugs your sleeve, whispering, "We gave him honey this year. Maybe he'll like it better than barley." You smile. "He has good taste." The girl grins. "My father says he prefers beer." You nod solemnly. "Same, probably." The ritual continues until the sun sits high, scattering diamonds across the water. When the chanting fades, the people disperse slowly, leaving behind the drifting chest. You watch it bob away, carried by the current. You wander along the riverbank, feeling the wet mud tug at your feet. The reeds rustle and somewhere a bird cackles, probably mocking your attempt to walk gracefully. You stop near a small shrine made of piled stones. Inside, etched faintly into the surface, is the shape of an ostrich feather, the symbol of Ma'at, the goddess of truth. You remember the herder's tale about birds and gods, and wonder how many miles that story has traveled. Nearby, a fisherman hums a tune as he mends his net. You approach. "Busy day?" You ask. He shrugs. "Always. The river feeds everyone, but she never makes it easy." He holds up the net, squinting. "Too many stones. Not enough fish. Sounds like my dating life," you say without thinking. He stares at you for a beat, then bursts out laughing. "Then maybe you should fish where the current's kinder." "Touche," he gestures toward the water. "Once, long ago, this bend of the Nile turned red. Not with blood, with clay. The flood was so heavy it brought earth from far south. The Egyptians thought it was an omen." You tilt your head. "An omen of what?" "Change," he says simply. "Always change." That event, you realize, might have been one of those massive inundations recorded in ancient texts. The flood that reshaped trade and boundaries, forcing kingdoms to rebuild their fields, their homes, their faith. It's strange how one river could rewrite human history every year with nothing more than water. As you continue your walk, you notice fragments of pottery near the shore, some plain, some painted. You pick one up. The clay feels smoother than the shard you found in the desert. Traces of blue pigment cling to the curve. A woman washing laundry nearby glances over. "From old Kerma," she says proudly. "Our grandparents dig them up after every flood. The river likes to return what she hides." You hold it to the light. "Beautiful," you whisper. She nods. "It belonged to someone who painted with patience." The phrase lingers. The painted eggs, the pottery. Everything here seems to echo that same reverence for creating beauty that lasts. As afternoon settles, you take shelter under a sycamore fig tree. Its branches spread wide, leaves dense enough to filter the sun into soft green light. The ground smells of sap and warm earth. A breeze stirs the leaves, and for a moment you swear you hear voices again, like the dunes, but gentler. The sound of water trickling through hidden roots, whispering things only trees remember. You rest your back against the trunk, eyes half closed. Her man joins you, older, with lines around his mouth that suggest both laughter and wisdom. He carries a scroll of rough papyrus. "Traveler," he greets softly. "Do you listen to the river or only look at it?" You smile. "Trying to do both." It's loud and quiet at the same time. He nods. And then you're hearing correctly. He unrolls the scroll showing sketches, reeds, birds and boats. I draw what I see. So one day when the river forgets, someone might remember for her. Do you think she forgets? You ask. He smiles sadly. The river forgets nothing. We do. The light shifts golden. The color of honey poured slowly from a jar. The air buzzes with tiny insects, each one orbiting lazily in the heat. You watch the old man sketch for a while. Quick, confident strokes. He's not drawing for fame, just to preserve quiet miracles. Historians still debate whether the Nile's flooding pattern was divine or simply seasonal, you murmur. He chuckles. Divine, seasonal. Words for the same wonder. The evening arrives with slow grace. The world cools, colors deepening into amber and violet. The villagers light small lamps by the water. Reflections shimmer, tiny stars dancing on the surface. Someone plays a flute, soft and melancholic. It's the kind of melody that feels designed to make you nostalgic for a life you've never lived. You walk again to the river's edge. The ferryman's words return. The river sees everything. You look down and your reflection stares back, rippled and uncertain. You dip a hand into the current. The water feels cooler now, darker, almost secretive. Somewhere downstream, perhaps a few days' journey away, the land narrows again. The river will wind past cliffs and temples, past the holy mountain where kings once carved their names. But that's for later. Tonight the Nile bends south, and you bend with it, carried by its eternal patience. The stars begin to shimmer overhead, and the frogs start their nightly gossip again. You smile, realizing how far you've come from the silence of the dunes, and how the journey somehow still feels like the same quiet song. Tomorrow, the air will fill with the scent of smoke and pigment, and you'll find yourself among artisans who turn shells into miracles. But for now, the river hums like a lullaby, and you listen. The night doesn't end when the sun slips behind the horizon. It just changes color, changes rhythm. You can still hear the Nile breathing, long and deep, as if the river itself is exhaling from a long day of carrying silt and secrets. Around you, the world hums in low tones, the croak of frogs that never seem to get tired, the rustle of reeds brushing one another like gossiping neighbors, and somewhere beyond, the faint tinkle of a bell on a goat's neck, sounding like laughter lost in the dark. You follow that sound, not out of purpose, but because the air smells of wood smoke and sweet beer, and because you've learnt that in Nubia, any sound worth following usually leads to music. The sand beneath your feet gives way to packed earth as you near a grove of acacia trees. Their branches twist like the arms of dancers caught mid-gesture, the leaves shivering in the faint breeze. Beneath them, you find a small fire crackling, its glow licking the undersides of the leaves in molten amber. A half-dozen figures sit in a loose circle, their faces soft with light, their hands busy, plucking strings, tapping clay drums, pouring drink. Someone looks up and smiles at you. Traveler, they call. Come sit before the music cools. You do. Because really, who could resist an invitation like that? The air here is thick with the perfume of roasting grain and date beer. A child leans against his mother's lap, eyes wide, lulled by rhythm. One man shakes a rattle made from a gourd and pebbles, keeping time with his knee. And at the center sits an old woman, with skin as deep and smooth as polished wood, a necklace of cowrie shells gleaming like captured stars. Her fingers hover over a stringed lyre, and when she plucks the first note, it feels as if the air itself shivers awake. It's not the kind of music you'd find on a playlist. No flashy transitions, no auto-tune, just a hum that rolls like water over stone, a melody that forgets where it began and doesn't care where it ends. You lean back, letting it pour over you. A young man passes you a cup, the rim chipped, the contents foaming faintly. Fermented barley, he says. Good for the spirit. Also good for forgetting your problems, at least until dawn. You laugh and take a sip. It's sour and smoky and alive, like it's still arguing with itself about being drinkable. Not bad, you say, trying not to make a face. He grins. It gets worse the longer you sit. That earns a soft chuckle from the others, a ripple of sound that folds neatly into the rhythm of the drums. The old woman continues her song, her voice low and rough like river clay, singing of the first flood, when the Nile carved her name into stone and made the land bloom. It's then that you realize you're listening to a story older than writing. The song shifts. The melody darkens, slow and deliberate, and the rattle grows louder, urgent. She's singing of Pie, someone whispers beside you. The Black Pharaoh who took Egypt back, you remember the name. Pa, the Kushite king of the 25th dynasty. A man who rode north from Nubia and conquered Egypt. Not with cruelty, but with ceremony, insisting temples be cleansed, that offerings be made, that the gods be respected again. It's one of those moments history likes to underline twice. But here, the song isn't about conquest. It's about return. About a river that refused to forget its source. Historians still debate whether Pa came for faith or power, murmurs the man beside you, eyes reflecting the firelight. But in songs like hers, he nods toward the old woman. He never left for either. He came because the Nile told him to. You listen harder. Beneath her melody, there's a rhythm like oars dipping in water, steady, inevitable. You can almost see him, Paye standing tall on a boat of cedar, crown glinting like sunlight, the wind heavy with prayers and dust. You find yourself whispering without meaning to. Does she know all that by heart? By heart, the man echoes. No, by blood. You sit quietly for a moment, staring into the fire. Sparks leap up and vanish into the night like impatient stars. The heat licks your face, and the air hums with the smell of smoke and date syrup. Somewhere above the leaves sigh, and a single acacia pod drops beside you, landing with a soft thunk. Maybe that's a sign, you joke. Nature's applause, he chuckles. Or a warning to move your head next time. The group laughs again, the kind of laughter that slides easily between strangers. The tension of travel drains out of you, like water from a cracked pot. And then the song changes once more. The drums stop, replaced by the slow pluck of a harp. The old woman leans forward, eyes reflecting the flames. Do you want to hear how the ostrich got her painted eggs? She asks. The question floats into the night, settling softly between the trees. You nod before you even think about it. She smiles, small, knowing, and begins. Long ago, before the Nile learned to flood, the ostrich was pure white. So white the sun envied her feathers. So proud she was that she walked with her head high and her eyes closed, believing the world would always bow before her. The others hum low, as if they've heard it before. One day, she continues, the ostrich found herself thirsty and followed the wind south. She crossed dunes, rivers, mountains, until she reached a valley where children painted stones to look like birds. They laughed when they saw her, and their laughter made her heart small. So she knelt beside their fire and asked for color. The children dipped their fingers in clay and ash and touched her feathers one by one, painting the stories of the desert onto her skin. And when they finished, they gave her the first egg, painted with their joy. Her voice fades into a whisper. Ever since then, the ostrich remembers, she carries stories, not pride. The fire crackles. No one speaks for a long while. You realize that what she's told isn't just a myth. It's the beginning of the painted eggs you came to find. The young man beside you breaks the silence. My grandmother says each pattern holds a promise. Some for love, some for protection, some for travel. Which is which? You ask, he shrugs. You'll know when one calls to you. You look toward the fire where a small basket of shells and painted shards rests near the woman's feet. The patterns swirl like rivers frozen mid-laugh, spirals, zigzags, dots that pulse under the light. It's almost hypnotic. The old woman catches your gaze and grins. Careful, traveler. The river sees through those patterns. You laugh nervously. And what does it see? Everything you try to hide. You sip the last of your drink, suddenly less confident. The night stretches on. Someone adds a log to the fire, and the smoke curls upward, carrying with it the smell of resin and heat. The group begins another song, this one livelier, teasing. The rhythm of it feels like footsteps, like flirtation. A woman sings about a fisherman who can't swim, but still manages to break hearts. The others join in, clapping and laughing. You can't help but think it's the world's first rom-com soundtrack. A boy passes around a dish of roasted locusts, crunchy and glistening. You hesitate, but he grins. They taste like almonds. You take one, crunch. He's wrong, they taste like adventure and bad decisions. But you smile anyway. He beams. You like? Absolutely, you say, hoping your face isn't making its own opinion known. The laughter returns, full and genuine. For a while, the whole world is just this, music. Warmth, rhythm, and smoke under a sky so wide it could swallow thought itself. And then, from somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat answers theirs, slower, deeper. The group falls quiet, heads tilting toward the sound. Another village? You ask. The old woman shakes her head. No, that's the drum of the priests. They call the night to listen. It sends a small shiver through you, though the air remains warm. The drum echoes again, softer now, as if the desert itself is humming along. Is it a ritual? You whisper. Yes, she says. Tonight they honor the coming of the flood. The Nile rises soon. Everything must remember who it belongs to. You think of the ferryman from earlier, the way he spoke about the river like it was alive, conscious, easily offended. Maybe he wasn't exaggerating. The woman's fingers return to her lyre. Once, she says, men built temples to mark that rhythm. They prayed the waters would come gently. You picture it, the temple of Amun at Jebel Barkal, carved from stone the color of honey, its columns shaped like papyrus stalks. A priest in white robes raising his hands to the night sky, waiting for the flood's whisper. That moment of held breath before chaos and renewal, historians still debate, she says softly, whether those songs were prayers or warnings. Her voice lingers on that last word. Warnings like a chord not quite resolved. The fire dips low, the embers glowing like eyes half closed. Someone hums quietly. The smell of smoke clings to your hair, your clothes, your dreams. You feel a weightless calm settle over you, like silt drifting through slow-moving water. When you look up, the stars seem closer, pulsing with faint color. You can almost believe they're listening. Do you ever sleep? You ask her. Only when the river does, she says. You smile. So, never? Her laugh is a dry whisper. You learn to dream awake. She plucks one last note from her lyre, a sound so thin and bright it seems to thread through the leaves and disappear into the dark. For a long moment, nobody moves. Even the frogs hold their breath. And then, quietly, she begins gathering her shells, her strings, her silence. The others stand, stretch, whisper their good nights. The fire dies with a gentle sigh. You linger, reluctant to leave as the air cools and the moon slides between the branches. Somewhere downstream, the priest's drum fades into nothing, replaced by the slow lap of the Nile against the roots of the acacia trees. The young man claps your shoulder. Tomorrow we paint, he says. You'll see the colors the river left behind. You nod. Although your body feels already halfway to dreaming, as you lie back against the earth, the world narrows to one last sound, the faint hum of her song still echoing through the soil. It moves through you, through the river, through the sand, like a pulse remembering itself. You close your eyes, and the stars sway above you like lanterns in deep water. The night holds its breath, waiting for color to return, and somewhere in the dark the river begins to stir again. You wake to warmth, not the kind that burns, but the slow-blooming kind that creeps across your skin like honey poured over stone. Somewhere above, acacia leaves flicker between gold and green, and the sky beyond them glows the pale blue of new breath. The fire from last night is just a whisper of ash now, soft and silver, with a few stubborn embers glowing like secrets that refuse to die. You can still smell the ghosts of smoke and roasted grain clinging to your hair. The bird shrieks, a raw, joyful sound that seems to shake the air out of its sleep. You sit up, blinking. The Nile stretches nearby, half mirrored, half dreaming. Its surface catches the early light and scatters it like spilled coins. You almost expect it to wink back at you. The young man from last night, the one who'd promised color with dawn, is already awake. He's kneeling beside a basket, grinding something red between smooth stones. The sound is rhythmic, soothing. You'll sleep like the river after a storm, he says without looking up. Meaning, peacefully he smirks, meaning loud and full of strange noises. You can't argue with that. He gestures for you to come closer. We're heading to Kerma today, he says. You'll see the market. The colors there make dreams look dull. You stretch, bones cracking like old wood. I'm convinced. Just promise me no more locust snacks, he laughs. No promises. The path to Kerma follows the Nile's bend southward, a ribbon of ochre dust flanked by reeds that whisper and bow. The air smells of water and clay, cleaner than the desert, thicker than memory. Along the way you pass oxen trudging through fields, their hides glinting with dew. Farmers raise hands in greeting and you wave back, feeling oddly like you belong here, like the night songs gave you some invisible passport. The road hums with small sounds, sandals brushing dust, pots clinking, the lazy creak of wooden carts. Somewhere ahead, a woman's laughter rolls across the breeze, rich and round. The scent of baking bread drifts toward you, thick enough to follow blindly. When you finally reach Kerma, it doesn't appear all at once. It unfolds. At first, just rooftops, flat mud brick slabs rising like steps from the river. Then smoke columns, faint but steady. Then color, bright bolts of fabric strung between poles like captured rainbows left out to dry. By the time you step into the main square, the noise hits you like a living thing. It's glorious chaos. Drums echo from one corner, goats bleat indignantly in another, and the crowd moves like a single restless tide. Every breath tastes of spice and sweat and promise. The heat climbs, but the air vibrates with energy, like the market itself is breathing. You turn to your companion. Okay, this place feels like if a festival and a traffic jam had a baby. He grins. Welcome to Kerma. You walk through stalls lined with clay pots, beads, carved ivory, baskets bursting with dates, figs, and something that looks suspiciously like pickled crocodile. The sellers call out in voices like music, sing-song, teasing, traveler. You need sandals. My sandals have danced before kings. Another waves a painted jar. This one keeps away mosquitoes and mother-in-laws. You laugh, shaking your head, half tempted by both. The air shifts again as you reach the heart of the market. Here, artisans sit cross-legged before their work, hands stained in ochres and blues, grinding minerals into powders fine as size. You watch a woman dip a reed brush into yellow pigment, her wrist flicking quick as bird wings. On the ground beside her, a row of ostrich eggs gleams in the light, each one painted with dizzying care. Spirals, lines, dots like constellations. Your breath catches. You remember the old woman's story from last night, the white ostrich humbled by color. These, says your guide, crouching beside the eggs, are for those who listen. You crouch too, careful not to disturb the artist. Her fingers move with sure rhythm, her brow furrowed in gentle concentration. When she speaks, it's barely above a whisper. Each egg is a prayer, she says. Some for the living, some for those who walk too far into the desert. You trace the edge of one with your eyes, a spiral in deep blue encircled by gold dots. What's this one? Protection for travelers, she says, glancing up at you with a small smile. Though it doesn't work against mosquitoes. Shame, you murmur. I could use both kinds of protection. She chuckles softly, the sound folding into the hum of the crowd. Beyond her stall, a group of children chase a goat draped in fabric. One of them trips, laughs, and keeps running. A nearby merchant sighs dramatically. That goat owes me 2 copper rings. Your guide shakes his head. Don't ask. Last week it was a chicken wedding. You blink. What? He shrugs. It's complicated. Somewhere deeper in the market, a horn sounds, long and low. The crowd ripples toward it. Your companion gestures. Come, it's the traders' procession. You follow as the street widens, revealing an open square. The ground here is packed hard, scarred with footprints and cart tracks. A line of camels moves slowly through the center, their shadows stretching long and thin across the earth. Each camel carries baskets overflowing with goods, incense, copper, lapis from distant mines. The trade caravans from Egypt, your guide explains. They've come for gold, ivory, and art crafts. You watch the merchants unload their treasures, glinting necklaces, folded linens, jars sealed with wax. It's history happening in front of you, alive and noisy. Someone nearby mutters, "They say Pharaoh Thutmose himself once traded here." You raise a brow. Really? He shrugs. Historians still debate that, but the sand remembers. The idea lingers in your head. The sand remembers. The crowd thickens as the traders begin to haggle. You overhear bursts of laughter, sharp words softened by smiles. There's a rhythm to it. Offer, refusal, joke, offer again. Like music disguised as commerce. You pause near a stall where an older man is selling dyed cloth. He's quick-tongued and quicker-eyed. "You," he says, pointing at you. "You need color, your clothes look tired." "They're just modest," you protest. He clucks his tongue. "Modesty is for goats. Here, try this." Before you can object, he drapes a shawl around your shoulders, thin linen shot through with red threads that shimmer like veins of fire. "It's surprisingly soft." "Well," he demands, "now you look like a story worth telling." You laugh, glancing at your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. "I look like I belong in a mural." "Exactly," he says proudly. "Just stand still for 1,000 years." You're about to reply when a sudden gust of wind blows across the square, scattering petals and dust. The smell changes, earthier, sharper. Everyone looks toward the west, where dark clouds are gathering on the horizon. Rain, you ask. Your companion shakes his head. The flood is coming early this year. The air thickens with tension and anticipation. You can feel it under your skin, the hum of something vast and alive preparing to move. Traders hurry to cover their goods. Women tie up baskets. Children chase loose cloths flapping like birds. But amid the bustle, the artists keep working. Their hands don't waver. The woman with the ostrich egg simply tilts her head toward the sky and murmurs, "Good. The colors will dry softer." You crouch beside her again, watching the red pigment darken in the humidity. "You paint even when it rains," she smiles. "Especially then. The river blesses what it touches." Nearby, a boy begins to sing, a thin, bright sound that cuts through the air like light through mist. Others join in, clapping to keep rhythm. The market becomes less a place of buying and selling and more a heartbeat. Your guide leans toward you. "We sing to greet the flood, to tell the Nile we're ready." The song swells, rolling like the river itself. You catch fragments of words. Rise, bless, return, remember. The rhythm is slow, hypnotic. For a moment you forget where the world ends and the song begins, and then, as if summoned, a drop of rain hits your arm. Then another. Then dozens. The crowd erupts in laughter and cheers. Stalls are covered, shawls pulled overhead. The air fills with the scent of wet earth, a perfume older than language. You tilt your face upward and let the rain find you. "Not bad timing," you say, blinking water from your lashes. Your companion grins. The Nile never forgets her cue. You help the artisans gather their baskets, careful not to smudge the painted shells. The woman wraps her eggs in linen, each one treated like a heartbeat. "Come to my home," she says. "The market sleeps when it rains." You follow her through narrow alleys where runoff flows in quicksilver streams. Mud splashes your sandals, cool and playful. At her doorway, she hangs the basket from a beam to dry. Inside, the air smells of clay and fruit. Walls are painted with ochre hands, small and large, overlapping like generations in conversation. "You make these?" you ask. She nods. "Each hand is someone who painted before me, a reminder that art doesn't end, it just changes hands." You run your fingers near one of the prints, not touching, just tracing the outline in air. "Feels familiar." She looks at you knowingly. "It should. You've been listening to the river." For a while, there's only the sound of rain on the roof. Then she opens a small pot and shows you what's inside. Tiny fragments of pigment, glittering faintly even in the dim light. "Red from iron," she says. "Blue from crushed lapis, black from soot. And this," she holds up a shimmering yellow powder. "From the dust of the temple at Napata." You blink. "Wait, from a temple?" She nods. "My grandfather gathered it before the flood took the old walls. They say it still carries prayers. It's beautiful and strange, the idea that color itself might remember worship. Outside, thunder rumbles low, like a drum answering the songs from last night. You sit by the doorway, watching the rain soften the streets. The market's noise fades into a steady hush, broken only by laughter here and there. It feels peaceful, almost holy. The woman sets down a small painted egg in front of you. "For your journey," she says, "protection and patience." You hesitate. "Are you sure?" She smiles. "The river led you here. It must have its reasons." You hold the egg carefully, feeling the smooth curve, the faint coolness of paint still drying. It seems to hum faintly, like a seashell remembering the tide. When the rain finally stops, the world feels new. The dust is gone, replaced by the scent of wet stone and green. The clouds drift apart, revealing a sun too bright to look at directly. The market slowly stirs again, vendors unrolling mats, laughter returning like birds after a storm. You step outside with the egg still in your hand. The light catches its surface, turning the painted spiral into gold. Your guide joins you. "You see," he says softly. "The Nile always pays her debts." You glance toward the river, swollen now, moving faster, darker. Somewhere in that rush, you sense something waiting, something the next bend might reveal. Where does the river go from here, you ask? He smiles. South, toward the kingdom of craftsmen and kings. The wind shifts again, carrying with it the faint scent of copper and smoke. You can almost hear the hammering of distant forges, the rhythm of creation calling you onward. You tuck the painted egg safely into your pouch. Then I suppose that's where I'm going next. He nods. Follow the color. It always knows the way. The market fades behind you, a hum of voices and laughter dissolving into distance. The Nile glitters ahead, restless and alive, its current whispering stories of gold and hands that shaped empires. You walk toward that sound, slow and steady, the painted egg warm against your palm. And though the road turns uncertain, you feel it. The promise in the air, the faint scent of iron and sun, the beginning of something bright waiting just beyond the bend. The air grows thinner as you leave the lush bend of the Nile behind. The green shrinks back, the reeds retreat, and the wind begins to sing again, low, grainy, ancient. You step into a land of burnished red dunes, their curves alive with heat and memory. The sand glitters as though it once held stars. Even the light feels heavier here, pressing against your eyelids like a hand asking for silence. You follow the faint trail of caravan prints, half buried and half forgotten, the kind of path that looks like it's leading somewhere important or nowhere at all. The horizon sways. Mirage or mountain, you can't tell. You squint. Nope, still hot air. There's a reason travelers here wrap their faces like secret letters, and by mid-morning, you understand why. A distant shimmer resolves into shapes, small domed shelters, glinting pottery shards, the slow-moving silhouettes of people gathering near an outcrop. The scent of smoke, dry grass, and roasted millet drifts your way. Someone's cooking, civilization, or at least breakfast. You quicken your pace. A woman greets you before you reach the camp, her eyes lined with white pigment, her laughter warm and raspy like sand over stone. She taps the small clay pot in her hand. "Traveler," she says, "you look lost." You smile. "No, just mildly cooked." She laughs, showing teeth polished smooth by years of sand and salt. "Then you've come to the right place. Sit. The dunes don't bite until noon." You sink beside her under the thin shadow of a canvas awning. The heat ripples around you in visible waves, and the ground pulses like a living thing. Every breath tastes faintly metallic, iron, sun, and memory. She pours a thick drink into a bowl. Fermented milk, tangy and cool. Flecked with something green you pretend not to question. "You've walked far," she says. "Kerma is behind you now. Ahead lies the red dunes. Here we make the eggs of patience." You glance at her, amused. "Eggs of patience? Sounds like something from a very slow chicken." She grins. "Not chicken. Ostrich. But patience, yes." She gestures toward a group of women seated in a loose circle near the rocks. Their fingers move with reverence, painting large ostrich eggs with ochre, soot, and crushed shells. The designs twist and weave. Rivers, stars, small boats, sometimes eyes, always eyes. The shells gleam with wet pigment, and every so often one of the women blows gently across her work, murmuring a word you can't quite catch. You lean closer. "What are they saying?" "They're giving the egg a name," she replies softly. Every painted egg has a spirit. It remembers who held it. The breeze shifts. You hear faint humming, a melody older than melody, slow and circular like the dunes themselves. The women sway slightly as they work, their voices blending with the hiss of wind and the click of brushes. It's hypnotic, almost trance-like. You could fall asleep here, if not for the occasional gust that pelts sand in your hair. The woman beside you chuckles as you brush it away. "The desert likes you," she says. Then it has a weird way of showing affection. You pick up a half-finished egg resting nearby. The pattern is half reed, half feather, and something about the symmetry feels intentional, deliberate yet fluid. "What do these mean?" "Dreams," she says simply. "We bury them in the dunes when the sun turns red. They protect travelers and call the rain." There's something both practical and poetic in that answer, like ancient insurance with better branding. You imagine the dunes dotted with buried eggs, each one holding a silent prayer, each one eventually crumbling back into dust, releasing color back into the world. The woman's daughter, a little girl with braids strung with tiny beads, toddles over and plops down beside you. She's holding an egg so large it looks like she's carrying her own planet. Careful, her mother warns. It's not going to break, the girl insists, sticking out her tongue. You grin. That's what everyone says before it breaks. The girl giggles, hiding her face. You sound like a camel. You bow dramatically. Best compliment I've had all day. The laughter drifts upward, scattering like birds. It's an easy sound, one that doesn't ask anything in return. As the day stretches, the camp shifts into rhythm. Men return from gathering reeds and salt. Women trade shells for grain, and a pot of stew bubbles somewhere, thick, spicy, unreasonably good smelling. You catch whiffs of cumin and roasted onions, their fragrance cutting through the hot air like memory itself. The dunes pulse redder, as though the earth is quietly smoldering from within. And then, from the distance, a sound rises, deep, resonant, rhythmic. Drums. You glance toward the horizon, where a caravan crests the dunes, dust swirling behind them like smoke. The lead rider raises a hand, and the entire camp seems to inhale at once. They come from Napata, the woman whispers. From the temple. You stand, shading your eyes. The riders dismount with the grace of people who know exactly how much attention they command. Their garments shimmer with gold-threaded cloth, their skin dusted in red pigment. One of them carries a chest, small, ornate, carved with lotus petals. When opened, it releases a faint scent of incense and something older. Maybe myrrh, maybe just history pretending to be perfume. Inside are eggs, dozens of them, each painted differently, each resting on a bed of sand. Some shimmer faintly under the sun, reflecting red light like tiny suns. These, the leader says, his voice carrying easily, are for the tomb of King Kashta. You freeze for a moment, the name echoing. The pharaoh of Nubia, the father of Paye, the man who once united Upper Egypt under Kushite rule. A real event, a real king standing somewhere between myth and memory. The people bow, murmuring blessings, and you realize you're watching not a sail but a rite of passage. The eggs are carried reverently toward the west, where the dunes ripple like an endless procession of silence. You follow at a respectful distance. The wind cools slightly. The color of the sand deepens. The group halts before a mound marked by standing stones. The air hums, and for a moment everything, wind, sand, breath, stills. The leader kneels, placing the eggs one by one into the hollow between stones. To feed the dawn, he murmurs. To remind the sun of its promises. The others echo softly. You feel something stir in your chest, or just the quiet awareness that humans have always tried to negotiate with the sky. A sudden gust whips your robe, tossing grains against your skin like tiny sparks. The air smells of iron and storm. The woman from the camp stands beside you again, eyes distant. Once, she says, they painted the eggs with fire instead of pigment. Fire, she nods. They burned them in smoke mixed with resin. Said it let the soul inside see the stars more clearly. You try to picture it. Glowing shells cracking under flame, light spilling like melted pearls. Did it work? She smiles faintly. We're still here, aren't we? Fair point. A silence follows, long and full. Somewhere a hawk cries overhead, sharp, cutting, fading. The ceremony ends. People drift back toward camp, leaving faint footprints that the wind immediately begins to erase. You stay a little longer, watching the buried eggs disappear under shifting sand. Historians still debate whether these eggs were ritual offerings or practical charms for travelers. You murmur, half to yourself. Maybe both, the woman chuckles softly. Maybe neither. Maybe we just liked making beautiful things. Her answer lingers as the wind cools further. The horizon darkens. Dusk in the red dunes isn't sudden. It's gradual, like the world remembering how to breathe after holding it too long. You return with her to the camp. The smell of stew has deepened into something sweet and smoky, and someone strums a small lyre, the notes trembling in the air like tiny glass bells. Children chase each other around a fire pit, their laughter echoing like birds over the sand. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth, the spice, the way it fills the spaces where language doesn't reach. The woman sits across from you, cleaning her brushes. You'll leave soon, she says matter-of-factly. You blink. How do you know? Everyone who comes here leaves, but they take something. You glance down at the painted egg still tucked safely in your bag. Maybe that's enough, she smiles. Maybe that's everything. Later, when the fire burns low and stars begin to pulse awake, you climb a small dune and sit alone. The wind has calmed. The sand feels cool beneath your hands. You can still hear faint laughter below. Small human, fragile and endlessly alive. You take the egg from your bag. Its painted surface glows faintly in the moonlight. Reds, blacks and a thread of white swirling like captured fire. You turn it slowly in your hands, feeling the texture of the pigment. The warmth it still seems to hold. You whisper, half joking, "Okay, little egg of patience, do your thing." A breeze stirs, playful like the desert answering back. The dunes ripple once more, soft and endless. You exhale and lie back. The stars above you, sharp and infinite. The egg rests on your chest, steady against your heartbeat. You close your eyes and for a long time, you just listen. To the wind brushing through the dunes, to the distant echo of drums from Kerma, to your own breath melting into the night. And somewhere, out there beyond the horizon, you think you hear water again. Faint, rhythmic, calling you forward, toward dawn, toward the kingdom of kings, toward what waits beyond the river's next bend. The night doesn't end so much as it folds deeper into itself, a long exhale of sand and breath. You lie awake with the painted egg pressed lightly against your chest. Its surface, cool as river clay, seems to pulse faintly in rhythm with your own heartbeat. Somewhere in the dunes, a drum keeps slow time. Boom. Pause. Boom. The women have not yet slept. You hear them talking softly beyond the fire, their voices rising and falling like moths drawn toward the flame. Then a whisper. "Tomorrow." The first brushstroke. Someone answers, "Not tomorrow." Tonight begins it. You open your eyes. The stars above have brightened, not multiplied but sharpened, as if the desert decided that clarity should arrive only when no one else is looking. A gentle laugh floats across the camp, followed by the scrape of a clay bowl being set down. You smell pigment, a powdery scent of crushed ochre, ash and milk-fat binder. The air shifts, half smoke, half promise. "Come closer," says the eldest woman, beckoning you with her chin. Her name, you've learned, is Daria, a word that means both river's daughter and one who waits too long. Her hands are stained in colors the earth doesn't usually give away easily. Reds drawn from ground iron, blues coaxed from indigo leaves soaked in goat's milk. She sits cross-legged, an unpainted ostrich egg resting on a cloth before her, glowing faintly under the moon. You hesitate, because she looks like someone who might charge tuition. She gestures again. You shuffle closer, the sand sighing beneath your knees. "Watch," she says, "but breathe slowly. If you breathe too hard, the gods may think you are impatient." "Are they really listening?" you ask. "They always are," she says, then adds, "They're just very bad at replying." The group chuckles. Even the girl who once compared your voice to a camel giggles again. The sound curls upward into the night. Daria dips a reed brush into a shallow bowl. The liquid catches moonlight, thick, pearly and alive. She leans close to the egg, and for a moment the whole camp seems to stop breathing. When the brush finally touches the shell, it makes no sound at all. Only the faintest drag, like a fingertip sliding through silk. You watch as she draws the first curve, a wide arc that resembles both a river and a spine. She explains that the first brushstroke must always curve, never straight. "Straight lines," she says, "belong to men who build walls. Curves belong to mothers who teach patience." Her words settle into the air like dust after rain. You find yourself studying her hand, how it trembles slightly, not from weakness, but from listening. Each movement seems to wait for permission from something older than muscle memory. It's hypnotic. You think of modern painters hunched over easels, headphones on, caffeine in bloodstream, and you almost laugh. If someone from your time tried to paint like this, they'd post a time-lapse before finishing the first curve. The fire crackles. A man's voice, deep, weathered, joins in from the shadows. It's one of the caravan guards who arrived earlier, with the sacred cargo. "She paints the soul's doorway," he says. "Every egg begins as silence." The first brushstroke opens it. You look back at Daria. She doesn't confirm or deny it. She only keeps painting, her eyes half-lidded. The light plays across her face, flickering between gold and shadow. The egg begins to change. The pigment seeps in faintly, settling into tiny pores on the shell. The line darkens, then dries with a matte shimmer. You feel oddly protective of it, like you're watching a fragile secret being born. The man continues, "In Napata we say that each stroke is a memory of the Nile's bend. If you paint wrong, the river forgets your name." You raise an eyebrow. "So no pressure," he smiles. "Exactly." Everyone laughs again. a low, tired laughter that comes only when the night has gone long enough to forget its own length. There's something about the silence afterward that feels ceremonial. The dunes have stopped whispering. Even the embers seem to dim in reverence. Daria turns to you. Would you like to try? It takes you a moment to realize she's serious. You shake your head hard. No, I'd rather not anger any deities tonight. Ah, she says, but they enjoy beginners. I thought you said they're bad at replying. Yes, she says, but that doesn't mean they're bad at watching. She pushes the bowl toward you. The pigment glows faintly, blue with a greenish undertone like the Nile seen through tears. The brush is surprisingly light, rough at the handle where the reed was split. You steady your breath. Somewhere in your brain, a voice whispers, "You are about to ruin an ancient tradition in under 5 seconds." You dip the brush anyway. The egg rests on your palm, heavier than expected. Smooth but with tiny dimples that catch the night air. The moonlight turns it into a fragile planet waiting for creation. You hover the brush. Then, remembering Daria's curve, you make the stroke. It wobbles. Not disastrously, just enough to look human. Daria tilts her head. That one bends like wind, not water, she says. Is that bad? No, it means you are impatient to arrive. You smile. That's probably accurate. She nods once approvingly. Then perhaps the gods will remember your voice after all. The little girl claps. Someone drums a lazy rhythm against a clay pot. The moment is absurdly tender. A group of strangers under the stars, cheering for one slightly crooked brushstroke. You sit there longer than you realize, adding tiny curves beside the first, each one easier than the last. The egg begins to bloom with flowing shapes, half vines, half ripples. Daria guides you only with glances. The world shrinks to texture and breath. You smell pigment again. Sweet milk fat, sharp mineral, faint heat of ash. You hear the rhythmic scrape of brush to shell, the sigh of wind through canvas, someone humming an old Nubian tune under their breath. Every sound becomes part of the painting. For a moment, you forget time. The desert no longer feels empty. It feels listening. As you paint, Daria begins to speak again, softly, as if telling the story not to you but to the egg itself. They say long ago, in the days of King Kashta, before he ruled both Nubia and Egypt, the queen dreamed of an egg painted with the shape of the river. When she cracked it open, the yolk poured out as gold. She took that dream to the temple, and the priest declared the first brushstroke of every life begins before birth. That is why we paint eggs for the dead, to remind them of beginnings they never finished. You pause, letting her words settle. It's a strange thought. Beginnings after endings. You glance at your egg again. The lines twist and shimmer like tiny rivers caught mid-meander. The guard nearby adds, historians still debate whether Kashta truly saw that dream or if it was his daughter, Amani Shaketo, who continued the ritual centuries later. You smile faintly. Historians always debating, aren't they? He shrugs. If they ever agreed, they would lose their jobs. The camp laughs again. A wave of warmth passes through you, not just from humor but from belonging. You notice the women painting their own eggs nearby, each one telling a different story. Some carve faint marks first, small geometric grids to guide their hands. Others let the brush roam freely. One paints a crocodile with eyes made of gold dust. Another paints a bird with wings spread wide enough to hold the moon. Daria murmurs, every design holds a wish. Some for protection, some for fertility, some for forgiveness. And some, she glances at your egg, are for memory. You trace the next line carefully. The pigment dries in seconds, leaving faint crackles along the curve. When you tilt it toward the fire, the shapes ripple, as if the river itself is pretending to flow again. You realize how strange it is that these fragile things survive centuries, buried in tombs where time moves differently. Archaeologists dig them up millennia later and argue over whether they were toys, offerings, or messages. None of them hear the laughter, the drumbeat, the hush before the first stroke. They only see pigment and form, but here, tonight, you see the moment when it all begins. Daria leans closer. Do you know what happens after the painting? You shake your head. We bury them, she says. Some under sand, some beneath river water. Each carries a whisper for the dawn. You remember the earlier caravan, the sacred eggs buried for Kashta's tomb. So they're messages. She nods. And the river answers, eventually. Her gaze drifts toward the dunes where the night wind carries distant drums again. You wonder if the sound belongs to another camp, or to memory itself echoing back. The little girl yawns. Someone feeds more wood to the fire, sending sparks like tiny comets into the dark. Why ostrich eggs? You ask after a while. Daria smiles, as if she's been waiting for that. Because they are hard enough to survive journeys, yet fragile enough to remind us not to take life too seriously. So basically, like traveling with pottery in your backpack. She laughs, a sound like water breaking over stones. Exactly. Only this pottery watches you back. Another woman adds, also ostriches run fast. Their eggs remember the feeling of flight. You blink. That's poetic. No, she says. It's just true. The moon climbs higher, throwing long shadows across the dunes. You realize hours have passed. The air cools, crisp, tasting faintly of mineral and dew. A few stars fade near the horizon where the river must be sleeping. Daria finishes her final egg. She holds it up to the firelight, inspecting it the way one inspects a newborn. Proud, cautious, reverent. Then she sets it down among the others. There must be 50 by now, each glowing faintly with different shades, tiny worlds waiting for burial. The camp glows in their reflection, as if surrounded by captive moons. Someone begins to sing softly, a melody without words, looping gently like a lullaby. You recognize its rhythm from the Nile ferries near Kerma, where boatmen hum to keep balance in the current. The sound feels like water remembering itself. Daria places your egg beside hers. It will dry by dawn, she says. You ask, and then? Then it begins to forget us, until someone finds it again. You look at her, unsure if she's joking. She's not. The idea sits heavy in your mind, that forgetting is part of the design. That perhaps memory must sleep before it can wake again. You lie back, letting the cool sand cradle your shoulders. The painted eggs glow nearby, each holding a secret silence. The fire sinks low, flickering through the gaps between shells. The desert hums softly, almost like applause. You close your eyes, half dreaming. The scent of pigment lingers, earthy, sweet, like history trying to perfume itself. You hear Daria's voice still, though you're not sure if she's speaking aloud or inside your memory now. Every painter adds their own river to the world. When all rivers meet, dawn returns. Your fingers twitch, brushing against your own egg. The paint has dried smooth. You can feel the faint rise of each curve, like veins under skin. You think of tomorrow, of the path ahead toward Napata, where tombs rise from the sand like silent drums. You imagine what other stories those walls might hold, what other colors sleep beneath their dust. The night deepens once more. Your eyes grow heavy. The dunes begin their long whisper again, not words but an invitation. And somewhere far beyond the dark, you sense the river turning, slowly, surely, toward memory. Morning doesn't arrive suddenly here. It seeps in like color bleeding through the edge of a canvas. When you open your eyes, the fire is no more than a nest of glowing coals. The painted eggs around it shimmer faintly, holding the last traces of starlight before surrendering to dawn. The air is cold enough to sting, but already you can smell heat coming, that metallic scent of the desert preparing to burn again. You sit up slowly, brushing sand from your face, your hair, possibly your soul. The horizon is a pale violet bruise turning gold at the edges. Someone stirs beside you. The little girl from last night, wrapped in a linen shawl far too big for her. She's holding one of the eggs like a secret. She notices you watching. It's mine, she says proudly. You smile. I can tell. It looks confident. She squints at it. It looks hungry. Maybe both, you reply. Hungry is a kind of confidence. She nods as if you've said something wise, which frankly is a nice way to start a morning. The camp wakes in fragments. Someone pours water into a clay pot, the sound trickling like lazy applause. Someone else stirs porridge, the smell of millet and goat milk curling through the cold air. A reed flute begins to play from somewhere near the camels. The tune is simple, just 3 notes rising then falling, but it seems to chase away the chill more effectively than the sun itself. You stretch your arms and look east. The dunes are turning gold, each ridge lit from beneath as if the sand itself remembers how to glow. The world shifts from silver to amber, and for a moment you understand why so many ancient people worshipped the sunrise. It feels like a god you could actually depend on, punctual, quiet, consistent. Unlike Wi-Fi, Daria appears, carrying a shallow basket filled with dry pigment cakes. She looks like she hasn't slept. but in a graceful way, as if exhaustion were part of her beauty regimen. "You dream?" she asks. You nod. "I think so, but it felt like the desert was the one dreaming, not me." She smiles. "Then you are learning." The women gather around the coals. One by one, they take their painted eggs, inspecting them under the new light. The colors shift subtly. Blues deepening, reds warming, whites softening like linen freshly washed. "Morning is the second brush stroke," Daria says. You raise an eyebrow. "I thought we were done painting." She shakes her head. "We are never done. The sun paints what we cannot." She kneels by the fire, grinding one of the pigment cakes between her fingers. The dust glitters faintly in the sunlight. "Today," she says, "we make the colors of the sun." You lean closer. "What does that mean?" She looks at you like a teacher faced with a slow student. "It means the colors you see are not the ones that exist. The real ones hide between them." "Ah," you say, "so philosophical physics." She laughs softly. "No, just painting." She places 3 small bowls before her, red ochre, yellow clay, and something pale as bone dust. "These are our beginnings," she says, "but the sun has no true color. Only the desert tells us what it looks like." You find yourself mesmerized again by her calm, by the precision of her hands. She mixes the pigments with water drawn from a goatskin pouch, swirling until they gleam like melted jewels. The air fills with a faint mineral tang, warm and sharp, the smell of earth turning into light. A man from the caravan approaches. He's wearing a headscarf now, his face half hidden against the glare. You remember his deep voice from the night before, the one who said the first stroke opens the soul's doorway. "Daria," he says, "the riders from Napata will reach the river by noon." She nods. "Then the eggs must be buried before that." You glance around. The women are already at work, carrying baskets of finished eggs to a low dune where shadows still linger. "Can I help?" you ask. The man grins. "You can carry, yes, but do not trip. They say if you drop one, the spirit inside has to start its journey all over." "Good to know," you say, gripping the basket with both hands as if carrying a newborn made of glass and anxiety. The burial spot is small, half ringed with stones. The sand here is cooler, the shade lingering as though reluctant to move on. The women kneel, murmuring quietly. Daria stands in the center, holding her last egg, the one painted entirely in spirals of gold and white. "This," she says softly, "is for the path ahead." You set your basket down carefully, feeling the cool grit against your skin. The light shifts again, the kind of soft shimmer that makes every grain of sand look alive. Daria begins to chant, not loudly but steadily. The sound is more breath than music, a low rhythm that seems to come from the earth itself. The women echo her, their voices blending in waves. You don't understand the words, but the meaning is clear. Gratitude, memory, release. When it's done, Daria scoops sand over the eggs with her bare hands. She moves slowly, almost lovingly, until all that remains are faint mounds in the golden surface. Then she presses her palm flat on top of each one, sealing them like a quiet signature. "Why bury them in daylight?" you ask. "Because the sun needs to remember too," she says. "We give it color and it gives us time." You stare at her for a moment, trying to decide if she's a philosopher or just sleep-deprived. Probably both. Back at the camp, breakfast has become a small celebration. Someone roasts dates over the fire. Someone else pours honey so thick it moves like syrup in slow motion. The smell of butter and heat fills the air. The little girl sits beside you again, mouth already sticky with sugar. She points to the eastern dunes, where the light gleams harsh and white. "That's where the sun sleeps at noon," she says solemnly. You nod. "And where do you sleep at noon?" She grins. "Same place," you laugh, almost choking on your porridge. "You'd fit right in where I come from." "Where's that?" "Far away," you say. "A place with no dunes, too much noise, and nobody buries eggs anymore." She frowns. "Then how do your sons remember you?" You pause. "Mostly through screen brightness." She blinks, clearly unimpressed. As the sun climbs higher, the camp grows restless. The camels groan, stamping the sand with soft thuds. The wind warms, carrying that dry whisper that always sounds like unfinished speech. You help pack supplies, rolled mats, empty pigment bowls, baskets now lighter by half. The man from the caravan signals that it's time. "Napata awaits," he says, tightening the strap on a saddle. You glance once more toward the burial mound. The sand there gleams faintly, as if lit from beneath. Then you climb onto a camel which immediately looks offended by your existence. "Go easy on me," you mutter. It snorts, which frankly feels like mockery. The caravan begins to move. The rhythm is slow but constant. Step, sway, crunch, breath. The desert unrolls ahead like a page waiting for ink. Heat builds fast. Within an hour, the world has gone white gold. Your skin hums with warmth. The air tastes of salt and dust. Every movement seems exaggerated. A flap of cloth, a droplet of sweat, a sigh that feels like steam escaping your lungs. You squint toward the horizon. Somewhere far ahead, the faint glint of water trembles. The Nile again, maybe, or just the mirage of hope. Beside you, Daria rides silently. Her basket of pigments rests across her lap. Under sunlight, the colors seem alive, especially one small jar of gold powder that flickers like trapped daylight. "You'll use that in Napata?" you ask. She nods. "For the walls of the tomb. King Kashta's sun must not fade." You've heard of Kashta before, the great Nubian king who once united the lands from Napata to Thebes. His daughter Amanirenas carried his dream even further, defending Kush against Rome itself. But in Daria's voice, he sounds less like a conqueror and more like a man who wanted color to last longer than words. As the caravan moves, she tells you stories, half history, half heartbeat. Kashta said, she begins, that every ruler should see their kingdom at sunrise to know what they are truly guarding. He climbed the cliffs of Napata once each year, carrying only pigment. He painted the horizon with gold dust so the gods could find their way back. You blink. "Wait, he painted the horizon?" She smiles. That is what the stories say. Historians still debate that one, the man from earlier calls out, laughing. Daria shrugs. They can debate. We will keep painting. By midday, the heat becomes almost sculptural, heavy enough to lean against. Your clothes cling to you like a bad decision. The camels slow, heads bowed. Daria's pigments are now warm to the touch, the gold one nearly glowing through the jar. She opens it carefully, holding it toward the sun. "See? The real color." You peer inside. It looks like sunlight, liquefied, shimmering even in shadow. "How do you make that?" She smiles. "From desert mica and honey. The sun must taste sweet to stay." That line lingers in your head. The sun must taste sweet to stay. You think about how modern artists buy synthetic paints, labeled with names like Egyptian Gold No. 7, bottled by factories that never saw the desert. And yet here, a woman with sand in her hair holds something brighter than any metallic pigment on earth. The caravan pauses under a small outcrop of rock, the only shade for miles. You all rest, camels kneeling, everyone gulping water from shared skins. You sit beside Daria again, the gold jar glinting between you. "Do you ever get tired of painting the same thing?" you ask. She tilts her head. "It's never the same. The sun changes every day. We only try to keep up." "So, you're chasing light," she nods. "Aren't you?" You want to argue, but the heat has melted your sarcasm reserves. Instead, you watch the horizon again. The light there is so bright it looks cold, a paradox the desert seems proud of. Later, as you ride again, a sandstorm begins to form in the distance, a pale column twisting like smoke. The guide clicks his tongue. "It will pass to the east," he says, "but the wind still reaches you, scattering fine dust that sparkles in the sunlight. For a strange moment, everything around you glows. The dunes, the air, even the camel's lashes dusted with gold." Daria laughs, lifting her hand. "See, the sun paints too." You grin, coughing. "Yes, and it's not subtle about it. You can't help imagining this storm centuries later. It's sand falling somewhere near Aswan, glittering faintly over ruins, traces of this exact moment drifting into history. By the time the storm fades, the light has softened again. Afternoon gold replaces white fire. The air cools enough to breathe without feeling judged. You look ahead and finally see it, the faint outline of Napata, rising from the horizon like a mirage solidified. Low temples, broken pylons, cliffs behind them carved by the river's patience. Smoke curls faintly upward. Someone cooking, someone living, Daria points. There, the mountain of Jebel Barkal, the holy hill. That is where Kashta sleeps. You feel a shiver, though the air is warm. The closer you ride, the more real it becomes. Sandstone glowing orange, river glinting silver. The world seems to rearrange itself around the color of the sun. You glance at Daria one last time. She's staring at the horizon, eyes reflecting gold. The jar in her lap gleams like a captured dawn. What happens after we reach Napata? You ask quietly. She doesn't look at you. We paint again, she says. But not on eggs this time. On walls that breathe dust. She smiles faintly. You will see. The sun dips slightly, its light turning honey thick, casting long shadows across the dunes. The caravan slows, then stops. You can hear the river now, and faint, distant, but unmistakable. The same river that has followed you, patient as memory itself. And as the last light spills over the sand, every grain glows with color. Not just gold or red or white, but something between them. Something alive. You realize then what Daria meant, that the sun's true color isn't seen. It's felt, the world exhales, and the journey continues, toward walls that breathe and colors that remember. The first thing you notice is the scent, wet clay and smoke stitched together by the faint sweetness of crushed papyrus. The desert's breath has changed. You've come down from the dunes into the green edge of the Nile again, where the river sprawls like a sheet of molten glass, and voices echo across its surface. The caravan halts just before dawn's second light, and everything feels heavier, thicker, like the air itself has been painted with humidity. Napata is close enough that you can see the shadow of Jebel Barkal, the sacred hill, rising like a sleeping god against the horizon. The locals call it the Pure Mountain, and from here it looks as though the sun itself has been trying for centuries to burn a halo around its peak. Daria is already awake. Of course she is. She sits beside the river, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands dipped in the slow swirl of water. The sand remembers wind, she says quietly. But the river, she remembers touch. You kneel beside her, half still in sleep, half awake enough to feel the river sliding coolly over your fingers. It's been weeks since your hands felt something this alive. The camp begins to stir again. Pots clinking, a child laughing somewhere behind a curtain of woven reed. The smell of boiling millet drifts across the air, mixing with damp earth and that metallic scent of sunrise. You can hear distant drums from the opposite bank, temple rhythms, sharp and confident, like a reminder that the city ahead doesn't wake softly. You see them? Daria nods toward a cluster of figures knee-deep in the river. Men and women both, all working together in silence, hauling long strands of papyrus and twisting them into ropes as easily as if they were braiding their own hair. Their arms move in rhythm, water flashing from elbow to wrist, droplets catching the morning light. River people, she whispers. The Nile taught them its patience. You can't help but watch. The choreography of it is hypnotic. So practiced it looks like memory itself has muscle. One woman hums as she works, her song rising and falling with the current. Another laughs when a boy splashes her, and the sound ripples across the water like a skipped stone. Somewhere in the distance, a heron takes flight, dragging its shadow across their backs. Are they preparing for the tomb? You ask. Daria nods, brushing her wet fingers on her skirt. For the walls, she says. Every king who sleeps beneath the mountain needs the river's hands to build his memory. You think about that. About all the walls you've ever seen, cold grey echoing with history, and how here even the act of building is warm. A man nearby scoops mud into a basket, pressing it down with his palms, shaping bricks that glisten like chocolate in the sun. He smiles when he catches you staring. First time seeing someone make a wall from a river. He calls out. You grin back. First time seeing someone make it look like baking bread. He laughs, a sound deep and generous. Then you'll love Napata. We make everything the Nile's way. Soft first, then fire. You can't tell if that's philosophy or construction advice, but you nod anyway. The sun climbs higher, pulling colors out of everything it touches. Gold blooms on the water. The mud turns warm and red. Even the ostrich eggs you still carry in a bundle seem to glow from within, like they've swallowed the desert's dawn. Beside you, Daria begins tracing lines in the sand with a stick. Do you know what these hands have done? She murmurs. They've built walls that sing, painted rooms that breathe. The priests say when you sleep in a tomb like Kashta's, the paintings whisper until your dreams remember who you were. You tilt your head, intrigued. That sounds unnerving, only if you have things to forget. Fair point. A gust of wind rolls off the river, carrying the scent of lilies and fish, and something faintly sour, like old copper. The camp's tents flutter. A group of children runs past. each holding a handful of crushed pigment, streaking one another's arms with bright lines. One boy smears a yellow handprint across your tunic and declares triumphantly, "Now you are blessed by the river." You blink at him. That's not how blessing usually feels. He shrugs. "You'll dry soon." Then he sprints away, leaving laughter behind like footprints. When you glance back, Daria is watching the city again. The air between you hums with expectation. Napata waits, she says, but she doesn't welcome empty hands. You look down at your own palms, muddy, river-streaked, marked faintly with yellow dust. Then we'd better keep busy. Hours pass. You work alongside the river people, shaping clay, carrying reeds, occasionally pretending to be useful. Your arms ache in the best way, like proof that you're part of something ancient and deliberate. The rhythm becomes natural. Scoop, press, breathe, repeat. The water runs cool between your fingers. The sun warms your shoulders. And the hum of work wraps around you like a lullaby in daylight. Someone begins a story while they work. A tale of King Pi's conquest of Egypt, told half in pride and half in rhythm. You catch fragments between splashes. He marched north, the river behind him. The gods of Thebes bowed. Even Memphis bent its head. The storyteller slaps the mud for emphasis, sending droplets flying. The others cheer not because of war or victory, but because the river people have a king who built, not just burned. Then Daria adds softly, historians still debate whether Pa ever meant to rule Egypt at all, or only to remind her what it meant to have a heart. The men nod. You find yourself nodding too, though part of you wonders how much history is ever about reminders. The day stretches long and golden. You take breaks by the shore, watching tiny fish dart in and out of light. The water smells of moss and memory. Your reflection wavers beside the painted eggs, which you've set out to dry on a patch of reed mat. They look oddly at home here, gleaming beside the bricks as though both belong to the same ancient equation. Art plus patience equals afterlife. By midday, the heat grows thick enough to taste. The sky shivers with brightness. Someone passes you a bowl of sour milk, lukewarm, a bit alarming, and insists it's the best way to keep the sun from eating your thoughts. You drink it because refusing feels rude. It tastes like someone bottled regret. Daria smirks. You get used to it. No, you don't. No, she agrees, you don't. The laughter fades into the steady beat of work again. The women's hands move faster now, shaping, stacking, smoothing. Every so often, one pauses to dip her thumb into a pot of pigment, pressing a mark onto a finished brick, a signature no one will ever read, but everyone will feel. You start to notice those fingerprints everywhere, glowing faintly beneath the clay. That's when you realize the walls of Napata are being built not just by hands, but by memory. Each print is a prayer, each curve a sentence in a language you'll never fully understand. Evening slides in slowly, golden light softening into smoke. The workers rinse their arms in the river, turning the water cloudy with pigment. You follow their lead, kneeling by the current, watching blue swirl out from your fingertips like dissolving sky. Across the water, the temple fires begin to rise, points of orange trembling against indigo. The sound of flutes drifts back again, thin and silvery, threading through the quiet. Daria joins you, setting one hand on your shoulder. "So you've done well," she says. "I carried 3 bricks and almost dropped 2. "That's progress," she grins. "Tomorrow you'll drop only 1. You can't tell if she's teasing or making a promise, but either way it feels right. The river hums softly around your wrists, cool and forgiving. Somewhere upstream, a priest calls for evening prayer, and the voices of the workers rise in response, low, resonant, almost like the rumble of the earth itself. When the chanting fades, you lie back on the bank, arms wet, mind drifting. Fireflies blink between reeds, and the sky unfurls into velvet. You can still feel the pulse of the day beneath your skin, the rhythm of river hands and sun heat, of laughter and work and pigment. Daria sits nearby, holding one of the painted eggs in her lap. "Tomorrow," she says, "you'll see what the river's hands have made of their prayers." Her words settle like mist. The firelight dances on her face, and for a moment you imagine the river itself smiling through her. You close your eyes, hearing the currents whisper. It sounds almost like words. And somewhere just beyond that gentle murmur, a new sound begins, the slow beating of drums from the city, echoing through the reeds like the heart of Napata calling you closer. The morning doesn't begin so much as unfold. like someone slowly unwrapping light. You wake to the sound of water again, softer this time, as if the river itself is whispering a secret it doesn't quite trust you with. The air is heavy with the scent of mud, honey and smoke. And the first thing you see when you sit up is Daria standing at the edge of the camp, her hands raised toward the mountain. The sky behind her is pink and molten, the kind of color that would melt even the most confident sunrise selfie. Today, she says, without turning around, the river gives back what we've made. You stretch, half groggy, half intrigued. Around you, the camp moves in that strange Nubian rhythm, unhurried yet perfectly timed. Pots clink. Someone laughs. A rooster announces himself like he invented sound. The smell of flatbread drifts through the tents, warm and a little burnt. You're still rubbing the sleep from your eyes when Daria tosses you a cloth bundle. It lands in your lap with the subtle dignity of a wet sponge. What's this? You ask. Offerings, she says. For the afterlife. Mine or someone else's? She gives you a look. Both if you eat before the ceremony. You decide not to ask again. When you open the bundle, the contents surprise you. Small painted figures made of clay and reed. Jars of scented oil. Bits of bread shaped like tiny fish. Each item glows faintly under the morning light, as though dusted with invisible gold. The texture feels soft and dry, fragile yet alive, as if they've been waiting centuries to be touched. You made these? You ask? The river did, Daria says, kneeling beside you. We just shape what it remembers. You stare at the figurines. So the Nile is artistic now? She smiles. The Nile has always been an artist. It paints with time. That's the kind of sentence that sounds poetic until you realize she probably means it literally. By the time the sun lifts above the mountain, the caravan is ready. The air has that vibrating brightness that makes everything shimmer. Even shadows seem alive. You walk with Daria toward the riverbank, following a procession of women carrying baskets of painted ostrich eggs, others balancing jars of oil, perfumes, and carved amulets on their heads. The smell is intoxicating. Resin, sweet milk, roasted grain, and something faintly metallic that makes you think of eternity if eternity had a scent. Down by the water, priests are already gathered. They stand in rows beneath palm fronds, their linen robes gleaming white, their heads shaved smooth and shining like polished stone. One of them, older and taller than the rest, raises a staff carved with the image of Amun-Ra, the sun god, and chants in a tone so low it seems to vibrate the sand under your feet. The ceremony begins. You're not entirely sure what's happening, but you know it's beautiful. The women kneel by the river, placing offerings on woven mats. Daria lifts one of the painted eggs, the one you helped create, and holds it aloft. The gold dust you saw her mix days ago now shimmers under the sunlight, turning her hand into something divine. For the king's memory, she murmurs, and dips the egg into the river. The current catches it gently, carrying it downstream like a star on liquid glass. You whisper, "Should we go after it?" She shakes her head. The river knows the way. The priests begin another chant, this one higher, brighter, half prayer, half song. The sound weaves through the reeds and echoes against the sacred mountain. Drums answer from the temple complex beyond, their rhythm steady and ancient. You feel it in your chest like a second heartbeat. And then movement. From behind the priests, a procession approaches, men carrying large clay jars painted with blue spirals, others holding trays of bread, honey, and dried figs. One man carries a small wooden chest inlaid with ivory. He steps carefully, reverently, and when he passes close enough, you see what's inside. Hundreds of small Ushabti figurines, each no bigger than a finger, carved to resemble workers, farmers, bakers, builders. Daria leans close, whispering they serve in the afterlife. When the king sleeps, they work for him. You raise an eyebrow. So even in death, there's no retirement plan. She laughs softly. No one rests forever, not even kings. The priest sets the chest before the river and lifts his hands. His voice booms across the water, a mix of blessing and farewell. The air thickens with incense. You can taste it, sweet, woody, faintly spicy, like cinnamon burned on stone. It clings to your tongue, fills your lungs, makes your heart beat slow. The offerings are then carried toward the tombs. You follow the procession along a winding path of sunlit dust, past papyrus marshes and fields where herons glide low. The mountain grows larger with every step, its red cliffs carved with doorways. some open, some sealed with ancient bricks that still bear faint fingerprints. Inside the main chamber, it's cool and echoing. The air smells of chalk and oil, and the walls glimmer faintly in torchlight. Murals unfold in waves of blue and gold, chariots, rivers, kings bowing before gods. You recognize one figure immediately, King Kashta, his eyes serene, a hand outstretched toward the sun. A priest explains that these paintings are not decoration but direction. Each color leads the soul through a different part of the afterlife. Blue for the river of rebirth, red for the gate of trials, gold for the throne of memory. You can't help but think of Daria's pigments, of her saying, "The sun paints what we cannot." Near the rear of the tomb, a woman kneels to place her offerings, baskets of grain, cups of oil, and one single ostrich egg, painted white with a single red line spiraling upward. You ask quietly, "What does the red mean?" She glances up. "Breath," she says. "Every tomb needs one." It's beautiful and just a little terrifying. You find Daria near one of the walls, tracing her fingers over a carving of flowing water. "The river people's hands are here too," she whispers, hidden beneath the paint. You lean closer and sure enough, pressed faintly into the plaster, are human fingerprints. Hundreds of them. It's as if the builders left their own pulse inside the tomb, so the king would never sleep alone. You exhale slowly, the sound barely louder than a sigh. The air feels thicker here, as though the room itself is breathing with you. Outside, the sun waits like a living thing. The procession continues. More offerings carried in, lotus flowers, gold amulets, bowls of dates. You help unload one basket, though your contribution mostly involves pretending not to drop it. "Careful," Daria warns. "Some of those are older than you." "Everything here is older than me," you mutter. She smirks. "Not your clumsiness. You'll let that one slide. By midday, the heat presses down like a slow drumbeat. The last offerings are laid out before the tomb's entrance. The priests chant the final blessing, invoking both Amun-Ra and Isis, their voices rising in a tide of syllables that sound like the river itself. A jar of honey is poured into the sand, seeping down as if to sweeten the roots of the world. Then, silence. The ceremony ends, not with applause, but with stillness. Even the birds seem to pause mid-flight. The priests bow, the women kneel, and the sunlight glows on their faces like a slow promise. You find yourself watching the last of the offerings disappear into the shadow of the tomb. Something inside you, something quiet and unhurried, feels different. Maybe it's reverence. Maybe it's the faint, impossible thought that the afterlife might not be somewhere else at all, but right here, in the patient hands that remember. As the procession begins to drift back toward the river, Daria walks beside you. She's silent for a long while, her eyes following the mountain's edge. Finally, she says, "Tomorrow the painters will seal the tomb, and then the king will dream." You glance at her. "And what about you?" "I'll teach you how to make the dream stay." Her smile is faint, but it glows like gold in the fading light. The two of you pause by the river, where the first egg you released still drifts in slow circles, caught in a whirlpool of sunlight. You watch it spin, calm and eternal, and realize the Nile isn't just carrying offerings for the dead, it's carrying every story that refuses to end. And somewhere downstream, the sound of chisels begins, a faint rhythm, sharp and echoing, as the tomb builders prepare to close the passage between life and memory. The air inside the tomb feels like the inside of a held breath, still ancient, and waiting for someone to finish a sentence whispered 3,000 years ago. You step down slowly, one hand grazing the carved wall, your fingers picking up the faint texture of sand-polished paint. The air cools with each step, carrying that unmistakable scent of limestone and time. Behind you, Daria's torch flickers, throwing warm orange light over the hieroglyphs, rows of women with delicate hands raised in blessing, their eyes calm, eternal, and ever so slightly judgmental. "Don't stare too long," Daria murmurs behind you, voice low. They start staring back. You almost laugh, almost. But something in the air makes you believe her. The Queen's chamber lies ahead. Not vast, not grand like the pharaoh's resting places you've read about, but quiet and measured. Everything here seems to hum at a lower frequency, as though tuned to the rhythm of the river itself. You hear the faint echo of your own steps, blending with the drip-drip of water somewhere in the stone. It's hypnotic, like listening to time learn patience. You crouch slightly as you enter. The ceiling dips low, painted in deep ultramarine, scattered with faint gold stars. The pigment still glows despite the centuries, stubbornly clinging to its meaning. Someone once mixed that blue with powdered lapis from far beyond the desert, a gem more precious than gold. You wonder if the artist ever imagined their sky would last longer than their name. A single sarcophagus rests in the middle of the chamber. Its lid is carved with gentle precision, eyes outlined in black, lips drawn in a curve of serenity that borders on knowing. Around it, offerings bloom in stillness. Tiny alabaster jars, clay bowls, bundles of papyrus sealed with beeswax. The air hums faintly of resin and honey. Daria moves closer, kneeling by a bowl of dried lotus petals. "Queen Amanirenas," she whispers. "The one who defied Rome." You blink. "The one who fought them." Daria nods, her torchlight catching the faint shimmer of gold leaf along the sarcophagus edge. "Yes. When the Romans took Lower Nubia, she led armies north, took back the land, even marched into Aswan." Her eyes gleam. Historians still debate how many Roman soldiers she defeated, or how exactly she lost one eye in battle. But they all agree on this. Rome called her a barbarian. Her people called her divine. There's a pause. Only the quiet crackle of the torch, the slow drip of the underground spring. Then you exhale long and low. "She sounds like someone who wouldn't return texts," Daria snorts, the sound bouncing softly off the walls. "She wouldn't return empires." You can't help but grin. Humor lives easily here, like a flicker of life clinging to the edges of reverence. You step closer to the sarcophagus. Beneath your fingertips, the carved lines of her jewelry feel almost warm, as if the stone still remembers sunlight. You trace a bracelet spiraling into the symbol of the serpent goddess Wadjet, protector of kings, and apparently queens who didn't need saving. "Look," Daria says, pointing to the wall beside her. You follow the torchlight to a scene painted in delicate, almost tender detail. The queen seated on a throne of papyrus, one hand holding a golden ankh, the other resting lightly on the head of a lion. Around her, attendants carry mirrors and jars, a kind of celestial dressing room for eternity. She was buried with mirrors, Daria says, not just to admire herself, but so her spirit could recognize its own reflection when it woke. "That's poetic," you murmur, "and also a little terrifying." She smiles faintly. "Most eternal things are." You kneel beside her. The paintwork glows under torchlight, ochre, indigo, streaks of faded red. You can almost feel the artist's hands pressing the plaster smooth, their breath mixing with dust. Maybe they laughed too centuries ago, while mixing colors and humming about taxes or dinner. Maybe reverence was never entirely solemn. The torchlight trembles, and for a moment, you swear the golden stars on the ceiling flicker like real ones. The silence here feels deeper than sleep. A soft sound breaks it, the rustle of linen. Daria tilts her head, listening. "Wind," she says, though the word doesn't convince her. You whisper back, "You sure?" She raises a brow. "If it's the queen, you can apologize first," you grin weakly. "What do I even say? Your Majesty, sorry for the flash photography?" A small laugh escapes her. "Just don't sneeze," but the sound passes. It was wind, or perhaps the river itself breathing through a hidden crack. The chamber settles again into its long exhale. You move toward a side niche carved into the wall, a small alcove lined with offerings. Figurines, jewelry, broken combs, and a jar still sealed with beeswax. Inside, through the cloudy lid, you see what looks like bread, actual bread. You blink in disbelief. "That's still intact?" Daria leans in. "The afterlife is better with carbs." She's right. The ancient Egyptians believed the dead needed daily sustenance: bread, beer, honey, and occasionally a roast duck or two. It's funny how eternity, for all its mystery, still revolves around snacks. You imagine some ancient servant carefully placing loaves beside the queen, whispering prayers that she'd never grow hungry in the field of reeds, the paradise beyond the western horizon. "Look here," Daria says, pointing to another niche. "This one's unusual." You peer inside. A collection of miniature boats, each no larger than your palm, rests in neat rows. Their sails are made of papyrus, stiffened with resin, still faintly green. "She was buried with a fleet," Daria says softly. "They believed her soul would sail across the night sky on these, one for each journey the sun makes." You exhale. "So, interdimensional travel before it was cool." Daria chuckles, running a finger over one of the miniature decks. "Yes, and every sunrise was a return. The same journey forever. Something about that sinks deep into you. The idea of an eternal cycle, not of loss, but of returning light. You glance again at the painted queen. Her expression seems almost alive in the wavering light. Regal, calm, maybe even amused. She looks like someone who's seen everything. Empires rise, fall, and rise again, and still finds the whole thing vaguely entertaining. Do you think she knew, you ask quietly, that one day people would come here just to... Look, Daria shrugs. Maybe that's the point. You're the afterlife she hoped for. The words linger. You don't know if she's joking or not. The air shifts again, cooler now. The torchlight dances over the carved lions, the painted stars, the endless blue above. You imagine the ceremony that once filled this room. Priests chanting, incense swirling, gold shimmering like sunlight underwater. Somewhere outside, the Nile had flowed, carrying echoes of the living world to those who waited beneath. Do you know what the strangest thing is? Daria murmurs, you turn. What? They sealed her chamber, but left one tiny hole in the roof. Just wide enough for light to fall on her face once a year, on the day of her coronation. You tilt your head, following her torch upward. Sure enough, a thin crack cuts through the stone ceiling, faintly aglow with the palest blue of dawn. Historians still debate whether that was intentional, Daria says softly. But every year, for one heartbeat of sunlight, she wakes. You stare at that tiny seam of light, realizing the tomb isn't just a resting place. It's a clock, a story told in light. The queen sleeps, but the sky remembers her schedule. You and Daria sit in silence for a while. The sound of your breathing joins the slow drip of water and the gentle flicker of flame. The moment feels infinite, suspended between past and present. Then Daria speaks again, voice barely above a whisper. Tomorrow the priests will open the northern passage. It leads to the workshops, the ones where they made her statues. You nod slowly, your eyes still fixed on that crack of skylight. And maybe, you murmur, we'll see how memory is carved. Her smile glints in the dimness. If we're lucky, we'll see how it breathes. Outside, you imagine the Nile turning silver under dawn. The river still carries its quiet stories, its offerings, its forgotten reflections of gold. The Queen's chamber remains behind you, silent, luminous, eternal. But as you step back into the corridor, torchlight trembling, it feels less like leaving and more like being gently exhaled by history. And somewhere deep inside the stone, under painted stars and honeyed air, a queen sleeps, waiting for the next sunrise to remember her name. The first sound you hear is stone breathing, not metaphorically, well, maybe a little, but the air inside the corridor ahead moves like something exhaled from deep within the mountain. You follow it, torch in hand, the flame bending toward a passage carved with flocks of birds in flight. Their wings shimmer faintly in gold leaf, frozen mid-air, as though someone painted them halfway between earth and heaven and then simply forgot to finish. Daria walks beside you, her sandals whispering over the sand. The light trembles over her face, over the walls that pulse faintly with the scent of resin and dust. The priests worked here, she murmurs, the ones who carved dreams before dawn. You tilt your head. Dreams? She says. They believed dreams were messages from the gods, and they tried to record them. You glance at the bird carvings again. The idea of people trying to sculpt a dream suddenly feels less absurd than you'd thought. You're in a room where time is already soft around the edges. A narrow staircase winds down. The air gets warmer, thicker, the kind of heat that wraps around your lungs like wet cloth. The smell of burned oil and beeswax clings to everything. The flickering torchlight reveals the faint shimmer of pigment on the walls. Lapis, red ochre, crushed malachite. You pass a painting of priests kneeling, heads bowed, surrounded by ibis feathers. Each figure has a different expression. One serene, one afraid, one caught in something between awe and exhaustion. They recorded their dreams right here, Daria says, lowering her voice. On tablets of clay. They'd wake before sunrise, wash in the river, then describe what they'd seen in sleep. The high priest would interpret them, turning them into symbols, patterns, omens. And when a dream was powerful enough, she pauses, letting her torchlight slide across a carved falcon. They painted it. You blink. You mean, like literally on the walls? Yes, so the gods could see them too. You nod slowly. So, kind of like posting your dreams on the ancient version of social media. Her lips twitch, except theirs were carved in stone and still get likes 3,000 years later. Touché. You move forward. the tunnel opening into a chamber shaped like a honeycomb. Light pools across the uneven floor, reflecting faintly off bits of copper and gold dust that glitter like trapped dawnlight. Around the room stand rows of figures, unfinished statues, heads bowed, faces serene but unseeing. The air hums faintly with something you can't quite name, like the sound of wings that aren't really there. A table near the center holds a collection of tools, copper chisels, shards of quartz, a palette of pigments hardened into brittle cakes. Daria brushes her fingers across one. "This was where they made the statues of the gods," she says softly. Every curve had to match a dream someone had. They believed the gods showed their forms in sleep, and the sculptor's task was to remember it exactly. You look at one of the half-finished faces, the eyes still blank, waiting for life. "That's a lot of pressure for a dream recall." She smiles faintly. "The priests called it the burden of divine insomnia." You chuckle under your breath, then catch the faint flutter of movement at the edge of your torchlight. You turn your head sharply, but it's just a shadow playing across a carved wall. Or maybe it isn't. The painting shows birds again, dozens of them, painted in flight above a reclining figure. Their wings are drawn so delicately that you can almost hear them rustle. Daria notices your stillness. "That's the dream of the ibis," she says. "It was said that a priest once dreamt the ibis god Thoth flying over the river, his feathers scattering stars. The dream was taken as an omen of wisdom and victory. They painted it to honor him." "Thoth," you murmur. "The god of writing, right?" "Yes, writing, time, memory, and the moon," she smiles. "Basically the ancient version of a content creator with deadlines." You laugh softly, the sound bouncing against the stone. "I can relate." The torchlight flickers again, catching the glint of a small copper bowl on the floor. Inside it rests a mound of dried feathers and bits of gold foil. "Offerings," Daria says, "for clarity in dreams." They burned feathers of sacred birds, the heron, the ibis, sometimes even ostrich. The smoke was meant to open the way between waking and sleep. You kneel beside it. The scent of old ash clings faintly to the air, a strange sweetness under the dust. "Does it work?" you ask. She gives a little shrug. "Depends who's listening." You glance up at her. "You've tried it." A small smile. "Maybe once. I dreamt of a river turning into light. The next day the flood came." You stare at her, unsure whether she's joking. Then she adds, perfectly deadpan, "And someone stole my sandals." Ah. Divine justice. The silence that follows is gentle. Outside, you hear the faint trickle of water running through underground channels. The temperature here sits perfectly between warmth and coolness, like the air hasn't decided whether to rest or rise. You can taste stone dust when you breathe. Daria sets her torch into a crack in the wall and pulls something from her satchel. A small clay tablet. The surface is covered in faint markings. "See this?" she says. "A priest's dream record. They found hundreds like this. Some are prayers, some nonsense. One of them says," she squints trying to read, "A fish spoke my name and asked for better wine," you grin. "Prophetic. They took it seriously," she says. Dreams were how the gods whispered advice. Sometimes warnings, sometimes laughter. You tilt your head, curious. "What do you mean?" She hesitates, then gestures to a wall carving nearby. A priest kneeling before a floating ibis. The bird's wings are spread, and its beak touches the priest's forehead. Beneath it, an inscription reads, "To dream of wings is to remember freedom." Daria's voice softens. They believed that every dream of flight meant your soul had escaped your body to visit the divine. But you had to be careful. If you woke too soon, the soul might not find its way back. You glance around the chamber again. The air feels strangely light now, almost vibrating with unseen motion. "That explains the feathers," she nods. "And the caution." You look up. Through a thin slit in the stone ceiling, a pale shaft of morning light filters down, hitting the wing of a painted falcon. The pigment glows gold. For a heartbeat, it looks alive. Something about the sight tugs at you, the quiet devotion of people trying to translate the untranslatable. Dreams, birds, gods, flight, all pressed into walls so that maybe, just maybe, someone would remember what it felt like to be infinite. You exhale slowly. Do you ever think they missed it? Missed what? The meaning. The real one. She considers that. Maybe. Or maybe that was the meaning, to keep searching. To keep carving what can't be kept. You smile faintly. Sounds exhausting. Dreaming usually is. You both sit for a while in the quiet hum of the chamber. The world above feels impossibly far away. You imagine the priests waking in the blue of early morning, eyes still fogged with sleep, scribbling fragments of divine nonsense on clay before the day could make them forget. A heron cried twice. The moon sank beneath the river. The king will rise again. There's something beautiful about the futility of it. Humans trying to remember dreams that were never meant to be remembered. Daria stands, brushing dust from her hands. Come, there's one more place. You follow her through a narrow archway. The passage opens into a small circular chamber, its ceiling painted with spirals of blue and silver. It feels different here, lighter, almost serene. In the center stands a large basin carved from red granite, filled halfway with still water. The surface reflects the painted ceiling, so it looks like the stars are floating beneath your feet. This, Daria whispers, is where they dreamed on purpose. You raise an eyebrow. Like scheduled dreaming? She nods. They called it the Chamber of Feathered Sleep. Priests would lie beside the basin, inhale incense of lotus and myrrh, and wait until they saw a bird in their dreams. Then they'd wake and write it down. Every bird meant something different. Ibis for wisdom, falcon for power, swallow for return, heron for rebirth. You crouch beside the basin. The reflection of the torch wavers across your face, breaking into fragments. You dip one finger into the water. It's surprisingly cool, smooth as glass. For a second, you think you see a ripple move that you didn't cause. You glance up. Are you sure no one's still using this place? Daria smirks. Only the ones who forget they're asleep. You huff a laugh, but something about her tone leaves a soft chill behind it. A thin draft moves through the chamber, brushing your neck. It smells faintly of lotus, faintly of dust, faintly of something older than both. The torchlight flickers, and suddenly, just for an instant, you swear you hear wings. Not loud, but close. Like the whisper of something large gliding just out of sight. You freeze. Did you? She nods before you finish. Yes. The sound fades as quickly as it came, leaving only the slow drip of water echoing in its wake. Daria exhales almost reverently. Maybe they're still dreaming. You don't answer. You're still staring at the basin, watching the reflection of painted stars tremble in the dark water. For a moment, it feels like they're moving upward, as if the sky beneath you is rising. When you finally speak, your voice comes out softer than you expect. If God spoke through dreams, what do you think they'd say now? Daria tilts her head. Probably go outside. Touch some sand. You laugh quietly, the sound breaking the spell. The chamber returns to stillness. You rise, the torchlight wavering across the ceiling spirals. The scent of incense lingers faintly, sweet and heavy. As you step toward the exit, Daria murmurs almost to herself, the next chamber's where they carved the statues. The dreams had to take shape somewhere. You glance back once more at the basin, where the reflection of the stars ripples gently in your wake. For an instant, one of them seems to move on its own, a shimmer of light spreading like a wing. Then it's gone. Outside, the air feels cooler, the echo of wings fading into silence. And though you tell yourself it was just wind, some part of you still listens for the soft rustle of priests who once dreamed of birds and never quite woke up. The desert opens before you like a book written in sunlight. The first page is gold, the second wind, and the third, well, that's you, standing there with your scarf flapping dramatically like you're in a travel documentary no one agreed to film. The air hums with quiet heat. Every grain of sand seems to vibrate, whispering in its own ancient dialect. You squint against the brightness, one hand shielding your eyes as if that'll help. It doesn't. Behind you, the dark mouth of the dream chamber disappears into the dunes, and for a brief moment you swear you can still hear faint wings, the last echoes of dreaming priests. Beside you, Daria ties her hair with a strip of linen. Ready to walk, she asks. Define ready, you reply. She smirks. Good? You're learning the desert way. A gust rises, soft and deliberate, carrying the faint smell of dates, resin, and dust. You feel it brush your neck like a sigh. Somewhere far ahead, beyond the trembling horizon, lies the sculptor's quarter, the place where stone wakes up as gods. But for now it's all sand and sky, and the hypnotic sound of your own footsteps sinking into time. The dunes roll like the backs of sleeping creatures. The wind keeps reshaping them, erasing yesterday's footprints, rewriting today's paths. It's oddly comforting, like watching the world proofread itself. Every step forward feels like an act of faith. Daria hums a tune, low, ancient, and stubbornly off-key. You think it might be an old hymn, or maybe she's just bored. "Do you know what they called this stretch?" she says suddenly. You shake your head. The throat of the sun. Travelers said the heat here could swallow words before they left your mouth. You grin. So basically like walking into a Zoom meeting with bad Wi-Fi. She laughs, the sound scattering like chimes. Exactly that, the humor helps. It keeps your mind anchored, while your body wavers under the heat. Sweat curls down your temple. The sky presses down with that relentless brilliance Egypt does so well. Equal parts beauty and threat. Even the air shimmers like it's trying to trick you. By midday, the world smells like copper and baked stone. Your sandals are full of sand, and your optimism's starting to melt. Daria offers you a strip of dried fig. You chew slowly, pretending it's ice cream. A small group of travelers appears on a distant ridge, silhouettes against the blue-white glare. Traders maybe, or pilgrims. Their donkeys carry baskets covered with linen. One waves lazily as they pass, and for a brief moment you feel connected. Part of that slow, ancient pulse of motion that has crossed these dunes for millennia. Those might be going toward Meroe, Daria says. Back when Napata was still the capital, the road between here and there was a lifeline. Ideas moved with the same speed as camels. Not fast, but unstoppable. You picture scrolls and sculptures bumping along on camel saddles, traveling from one kingdom to another, like messages between gods. It's strange realizing how far stories can walk. As the afternoon stretches on, the sand begins to shift color, deepening into shades of rose and amber. The temperature drops just enough to make you believe in mercy. Daria points toward a ridge in the distance, where weathered statues half buried in dunes catch the last light like burnt gold. Old border markers, she explains. They used to stand tall, announcing the edge of Napata's sacred zone. Some still dream, I think. You climb closer. One figure's face is nearly gone, worn away by 3,000 years of wind. Yet its eyes, though hollowed, still seem to look toward something invisible. You run your fingers along the sandstone cheek. The surface feels warm, almost alive. Did they carve these out here? You ask. Some, Daria says. Others were dragged from the quarry on the riverbank. The workers believed each statue had a heartbeat before it was finished. They'd listen for it under moonlight. That's poetic, you murmur. Or delusional, she adds, grinning. Historians still debate that part. A sudden gust lifts the sand around your legs. The world dissolves into pale gold. You blink, coughing. Hey! Daria shouts through the blur. Careful. This is how dunes move. They like to surprise you. I think one just ate my shoe, you answer, half serious. Then you're officially part of the desert now. When the air clears, the world looks changed. The statues are half gone again, swallowed up by the restless skin of the earth. The sun's descending fast now, its color deepening to blood orange. Shadows grow long and patient. You both keep walking, chasing the light downhill until the dunes flatten into a shallow basin. There the sand gives way to cracked clay and scattered stones, shaped like broken cups. Daria crouches, brushing away the grit with a careful hand. Workshop debris, she says softly. This is it. The sculptor's quarter isn't a city, more like a whisper of one. Wind tunnels through the hollows of half-carved statues, creating a tone that sounds eerily like chanting. Everywhere you look, stone torsos lie waiting. Unfinished kings, sleeping lions, a half-formed goddess with her hands poised mid-blessing. You step closer, running a palm over a chisel mark still sharp despite the centuries. The scent here is different. Iron dust, old sweat, faint traces of beeswax. The smell of labor. Imagine working here all day, Daria says, voice low. No shade, no fans, just hammer and sun. You probably wouldn't survive an hour. Maybe 15 minutes if they had snacks, you say. Optimistic. She moves to a massive slab still showing the faint grid lines where the sculptors sketched proportions. They started with geometry, she says. Everything divine had to begin as math. Even the gods followed measurements. It's oddly comforting. The thought that holiness once had blueprints. A flicker of movement catches your eye. A small sand fox darting between broken pedestals. Tail a brushstroke of silver. For a heartbeat, you both freeze. Humans intruding on something ancient and alive. The fox tilts its head, then disappears behind a fallen lintel, see? Daria murmurs. Even the desert's got better timing than we do. You wander deeper, past toppled columns and shattered hieroglyphs. The air cools again. In the far corner, a low doorway leads into a shadowed space that smells faintly of smoke and resin. Inside, torchlight flickers on the walls. Drawings of hands, hundreds of them, painted in red and ochre. Some are small, some enormous. Many overlap, as if generations left their mark here. This is the Hall of Hands, Daria says quietly. Apprentices would press their palms in pigment before carving. A promise to the craft. You press your own hand near one faint outline, leaving nothing but warmth. Feels like signing a guest book, you whisper. Exactly, except theirs lasts longer. Outside, the wind rises again, carrying the low hum of evening. The first stars begin to bloom above the horizon, silver punctures in an endless indigo fabric. You sit beside a half-finished ram-headed statue while Daria lights a small clay lamp. The flame sways, its glow wrapping the stone in soft gold. For a while, neither of you speaks. The desert hums with the kind of quiet that feels earned, as if the world finally stopped holding its breath. Then Daria says, almost absently, they believed statues breathed at night. When the wind moved through the nostrils, the gods would visit. Just for a moment, you smile. So, every sandstorm's basically a divine concert? She laughs. Pretty much. Somewhere in the dark, the fox cries again. A short, sharp sound like the cracking of old clay. You tilt your head, listening. It sounds lonely, you murmur. Maybe, Daria says. Or maybe it's dreaming like the priest did. Of birds. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of wind and flame lull your thoughts. You picture the flocks painted in the dream chamber, their wings shimmering against the walls. But now, instead of flying through stone corridors, they glide across the night above you, gold, silent, endless. The lamp flickers lower. The dunes around you look like waves frozen mid-motion. The stars seem closer here, like they're leaning in to listen. You realize this journey, through tombs, through silence, through laughter that somehow fits inside eternity, has been less about discovering ruins and more about learning to pause. Daria leans back, resting her chin on her knees. Tomorrow, she says softly, we follow the trade road east to where the stones were cut. The Quarry of Kings, you nod. The thought of more walking makes your legs protest, but something inside you, maybe curiosity, maybe awe, feels ready. The wind brushes your face one last time before sleep. It smells of limestone and starlight. You imagine it's the breath of one of those sleeping statues, a god stirring faintly in its dream. And as the night deepens, you realize across the dunes of Napata, everything that ever lived still hums beneath the sand. The morning comes quietly, not with trumpets or blazing light, but with a hush so complete it feels like the world's holding its breath just for you. The dunes glow pale gold, the kind of soft color that makes even exhaustion look cinematic. You sit up, sand clinging to your clothes like glitter at a bad party, and watch the horizon blush with dawn. Daria's already awake. She's crouched by the remains of last night's fire, grinding something with a flat stone. The smell is sharp and metallic, like earth mixed with rain that hasn't fallen yet. Morning ritual? You mumble. Pigment test, she replies, not looking up. You can tell how old a kiln was by the color of its ash. You rub your eyes. I don't know, most people start their day with coffee. She smirks. Most people aren't looking for a god's oven. You can't argue with that. The sun edges higher. The heat hasn't arrived yet, but it's waiting. Patient, inevitable. You stretch, sand crackling under your knees, and feel the air hum with that strange anticipation desserts have before they decide whether to bless or kill you. The plan today is simple. Follow the old quarry road until it curves east. Then look for what Daria calls the secret kiln. She won't say more. She only smiles that small, infuriating smile that means you'll understand when you see it. The walk begins slow, deliberate. The sand here is coarse, darker, flecked with black basalt that sparkles like crushed glass. Every step crunches. The wind smells faintly of iron and myrrh, and the light is so clear you can see every ripple in the dunes like muscle beneath skin. Why is it called the secret kiln? You ask after a while. Because it's not on any map, she says. The builders used it to test clay for temple sculptures, the ones that weren't meant for the public. So, top secret pottery club? Basically, she says with a shrug. But with more divine consequences, you grin. Sounds like an art school I'd drop out of. Most apprentices did, she says dryly. If the heat didn't break them, the silence did. The silence, you realize, is real. There's no birdsong, no insects, just the hiss of wind and the crunch of your steps. It's so absolute that your thoughts start to sound too loud. An hour later, the dunes split open into a shallow valley. At its center, you spot the faint outline of collapsed walls, half swallowed by drifting sand. A few blackened stones stick out, their surfaces glassy from extreme heat. The smell hits you next, faint but unmistakable. Charcoal, clay dust, and something sweet, almost honeyed. Daria kneels, brushing away sand from a broken rim of pottery fused to stone. "This was part of the chimney," she murmurs. They burned limestone, charcoal, and crushed shells together, a mix so volatile it sometimes exploded. One kiln here destroyed half a workshop. Occupational hazard, you say. Ancient OSHA would have had a meltdown. She laughs, low and genuine. You're not wrong. You move deeper into the ruins. The ground is warm under your sandals, unnervingly so. You crouch, pressing your palm against the surface. The heat lingers longer than it should. Is it still active? You ask quietly. Not in the way you think, Daria answers. But the earth here remembers fire. You can still feel it breathing. In the shadow of a fallen arch, you find a set of stone molds, their shapes oddly familiar. Human faces, animal heads, coiled serpents. One even looks like a falcon mid-cry. The details are stunning, each feather etched with impossible precision. These were the practice forms, Daria says. Before carving stone, apprentices learned by firing clay copies. The masters believed the clay had a soul, but a temporary one. A life you could bake, shatter, and begin again. Like pottery reincarnation, you murmur. Exactly. Every break was a new start. She turns over a shard half buried in dust. Its surface gleams faintly red, a hue so deep it almost glows from within. That pigment, she says, came from crushed hematite mixed with goat's milk. The secret recipe for royal statues. Only temple artisans knew it. That's oddly specific, you say, and gross. Art demands sacrifice, she says with mock solemnity. You step toward what must have been the main kiln. The structure's round, its mouth gaping open like a fossilized wound. Inside, the air feels heavier, dense with the smell of scorched clay and age. A low hum seems to rise from the stones when you breathe. Daria lights a small bundle of incense and places it on a ledge near the entrance. The smoke curls upward in a lazy spiral. They believed the kiln was an imitation of the sun, she explains softly. The fire purified the earth, just as the sun purified souls. Every sculpture born from it was a piece of sunlight made solid. You stare into the blackened chamber. So this is where gods were baked? More or less. She grins. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes inside, though. I barely survived breakfast. Fair, she gestures for you to come closer. Look here. At the base of the kiln, there's a tiny opening just wide enough to crawl through, its rim darkened with soot. You kneel and peer inside. The passage leads into a low tunnel lined with bricks the color of blood. The air wafts out warm and mineral, carrying a faint metallic taste. Ventilation shaft, you ask? Or something else, she says. Historians still debate what it was used for. Some think it's where they tested smaller idols before firing. Others believe it was a ritual chamber, where they'd whisper life into the clay before the flames took it. You stare into the darkness. That's comforting, isn't it? You both decide to explore. The tunnel's low enough that you have to crawl, your hands pressing into gritty stone. The air grows thicker, warmer until the scent of charcoal and old incense fills your throat. You can hear the faint echo of your own breath, doubled by the narrow walls. Daria, you whisper. Still here, she says ahead. Her voice bounces strangely, as if the walls are answering in another language. After a few meters, the tunnel opens into a small underground chamber. The ceiling curves low, blackened by centuries of smoke. In the center stands a circular pit, lined with glazed stone, and inside it, fragments of melted glass and burnt clay, gleaming faintly blue. What is this place? You ask. The heart of the kiln, she says, kneeling beside the pit. They'd place failed sculptures here, ones that cracked or misfired, and melt them back into the earth. Nothing wasted. Every mistake became part of the next god. You stare at the shimmering remains, imagining centuries of dreams melting into one another, a kind of divine recycling. That's beautiful, you whisper. Practical too, she adds with a small smile. Even gods had budgets. A faint sound draws your attention, a low creak like pottery shifting under weight. You glance at Daria. Did you hear that? She nods slowly, eyes narrowing. The heat makes the old clay expand sometimes. Or, she pauses, something still moves beneath it. That's the part where you say just kidding, right? I could, she says, but it wouldn't be honest. You both listen. The sound fades. The air cools slightly, as if the kiln has exhaled. Daria exhales too, but with a grin. Relax, you're fine. It's only ghosts of craftsmanship. Oh good, you mutter. Friendly ghosts of pottery. You crawl back into daylight. The sun has risen higher now, baking the valley in shimmering gold. The kiln behind you glows faintly red under the heat, as if remembering its old purpose. Daria squints toward the horizon. You see that ridge? She says, pointing east. That's where the quarry begins. They cut the sandstone there for pyramids and temples. Some of the blocks were dragged over 40 miles. You whistle softly. That's a workout. They didn't have gym memberships, she says. They had ambition. You follow her gaze, imagining lines of workers, ropes, songs timed to the rhythm of sweat, the sound of hammers, the smell of stone dust. A civilization sculpting not just statues but meaning itself. A memory stirs. The hall of hands, the priest's dreams, the queen's mirrored tomb. It all feels connected. Fire, stone, and breath forming one long sentence written by time. Later, when the sun begins to dip, you both rest beside the broken chimney of the kiln. The air tastes of heat and smoke. The desert around you hums softly as it cools. The dunes sighing, the stones ticking with relief. Daria leans back, eyes half closed. You know, she says, they say the best sculptures were fired twice, once by flame, once by memory. Like second chances? You ask. Exactly. The gods always preferred the ones who survived the fire. You look at the kiln, its round mouth dark against the glowing sand. Do you think it still remembers what it made? I think it remembers everything, she says. For a moment, you imagine faint heat pulsing from the stones. A heartbeat too old to measure, too steady to fade. Then, as the last light slips below the ridge, you notice something glinting near the tunnel entrance. A fragment of blue glass shaped like an eye catching the dusk. You pick it up carefully. It's warm. Daria watches, smiling. Keep it, she says. A souvenir from the god's oven. Hopefully not cursed. Only mildly. You laugh, slipping it into your pocket. The desert wind carries your laughter away, blending it with the soft hiss of cooling sand. As night falls, the kiln cools, glowing faintly under starlight like a sleeping heart. You and Daria sit in its shadow, silent. The world reduced to warmth and breath. Somewhere out there, beyond the dunes, the quarry waits. A place where stone was once alive enough to sing. You lean back, listening to the desert's pulse. It feels steady, endless, a reminder that every fire, no matter how fierce, eventually becomes light. And as you close your eyes, you feel the faintest whisper of heat beneath your palms, as if the kiln itself is dreaming. The night has folded into dawn like a careful secret. You wake to the sound of sand whispering against your tent. A soft hush-hush that feels almost like breathing. The air is cool, carrying the faint metallic tang of dust and fire. Yesterday's heat still clinging to the bones of the desert. Daria's already outside, naturally, crouched by a flat stone with her notebook and a tiny brush, working like someone who thinks time itself might sneak away if she doesn't pin it down. You crawl out, blinking against the morning light. The dunes are blushing gold now, and the ruins of the kiln look almost gentle. No longer the infernal womb of last night, but something older, wiser. Smoke still drifts faintly from the pit, curling into air so still you can hear the faint tick of cooling sand. Morning, Daria says without looking up. Did you sleep? You ask. Not really. I kept thinking about the pigments, because nothing says good dreams like manganese oxide. She grins, the kind of grin that's half pride, half exhaustion. Come on, you need to see this. You stretch, bones creaking like papyrus scrolls, and follow her toward a shallow depression between the dunes. It's ringed with stones blackened by time, and in the center lie fragments, bright ones, blues, reds, golds dulled by centuries, but still defiantly shimmering against the sand. It takes a second for your brain to process what you're seeing. These are not pottery shards, they're flakes of paint, pigment fused into the skin of rock, surviving millennia of wind. It's like stumbling across a rainbow that refused to die. You crouch, brushing one with your fingertip. It's rough, grainy. The color clings stubbornly to your skin. This shouldn't exist, you murmur. Daria nods, her shadow long and trembling in the heat. That's what every archaeologist says right before they lose 6 years of their life to a lab. The two of you laugh, the sound oddly bright against the open silence. Then you fall quiet again, because the desert seems to ask for it. You pick up one flake thin as a dragonfly's wing. The pigment is ultramarine, the same impossible blue once ground from lapis lazuli, carried all the way from Afghanistan to Nubia. You remember hearing how much it cost in Egypt, worth more than gold. Here, though, under the sun, it looks humble. Just another piece of sky that forgot how to float. You imagine the painter kneeling right where you are now, grinding stones, mixing them with egg yolk or gum arabic, testing hues on bits of pottery. A brush made from ibex hair, a bowl of ostrich eggshell, pale and delicate. You can almost see their fingers stained red and blue, hear the slow breath as they layer color onto a god's face. Daria hands you her magnifier. Look closer. Under the lens, the pigment gleams like microscopic stars. She explains softly, this is why it survived. They mixed the paint with crushed quartz. The particles fused in the heat. The desert basically glazed their work for eternity. You blink. So the sand helped the paint. In a poetic way, yes, she says. The destroyer became the preserver. Classic plot twist. You both chuckle, but something about that line stays with you. You sit there as the light shifts, the air growing warmer. The horizon wavers and heat ghosts begin to dance, ribbons of silver twisting above the dunes. Somewhere a breeze carries the faint scent of wild myrrh, sharp and sweet. It reminds you of temple incense, of stories you don't quite remember but feel deep in your ribs. Nearby, a half-buried ostrich egg catches your eye. It's smooth and pale, glinting faintly. Daria brushes the sand away and reveals faint traces of painted lines, swirls of blue and red pigment still visible. Oh, wow, you whisper. Yeah, she says softly. That's the real reason we're here. You lift it carefully, half expecting it to crumble, but it doesn't. It's light but strong and cold against your palms. The paint traces a pattern that might be feathers or wind or both. Daria tilts her head. Did you know that in ancient Nubia, decorated ostrich eggs were sometimes buried with the dead? You shake your head. They believed the egg symbolized rebirth, the soul breaking free into the next life. Some were painted with stars, others with rivers or flocks of birds. It's like each egg was a personal map to eternity. You look down at the one you're holding. A celestial GPS, then. Exactly, she laughs. Except this one never needed an update. For a while, the two of you sit silently, letting the desert hum fill the space. The sound is low and endless, the wind whispering across 1,000 tiny grains, each one a note in an ancient lullaby. You imagine the artisans again, sitting in the same valley. Maybe they worked under the same constellations, grinding their blues from lapis, their reds from ochre. You can almost hear them gossiping, laughing, maybe arguing about whose pigment would fade first. History tends to forget that artists had opinions. Too, Daria wipes sweat from her forehead and muses, you know, historians still debate whether these eggs were made purely for the dead or used in royal feasts before burial. Some say they were gifts to gods. Others think they were early examples of luxury trade items. The evidence is complicated, so basically we'll never know. Pretty much. Which is kind of beautiful, don't you think? You smile. Beautifully frustrating. A gust of wind blows, scattering sand over your knees. You brush it away and suddenly you catch sight of a shallow carving beneath where the egg was lying. You clear it with your fingers, lines etched into the rock, a handprint small and ancient with traces of pigment pressed into the grooves. Red, blue, white. Someone signed their work, you whisper. Daria kneels beside you. Looks like it. You both study it for a long moment. It feels oddly intimate, like catching someone's breath across thousands of years. The sun climbs higher, and the heat presses closer. The air buzzes faintly with cicadas. You retreat to a patch of shade under a crumbling wall, where the plaster still bears faint murals. Ibis, antelope, and strange hybrid beasts, half bird, half woman. The colors shimmer as if alive. You pull your canteen from your pack and take a sip, grimacing. Still warm. I'd kill for ice. Daria raises an eyebrow. In Napata? You sigh. Okay, I gently inconvenience someone for ice, she laughs, and the sound blends with the whisper of sand, soft and human. For the next hour, you help her document the pigments, photographing, labeling, sketching. The heat turns your clothes heavy, sticky. Every breath tastes of minerals and salt. Yet there's something oddly soothing about it, as if the air itself is steeped in ancient patience. When Daria finally calls for a break, she sits back with a sigh. You know what fascinates me? She says. Color outlasts empires. The kingdom of Napata fell, temples crumbled, names were forgotten, but the blue stayed blue. You nod, watching sunlight flicker over the fragments. Paint that survives sand, you murmur. That's your title right there. Hey, I should start a podcast, you grin. Too late, she smirks. You're already in one. You both laugh again. The moment feels light and human and timeless. Later, when the sun dips low and the shadows grow long, you wander a little from camp. The wind is cool now, brushing against your skin like silk. The dunes gleam under a rising moon, soft and silver. You hold the painted egg close, the pigments catching moonlight. It feels warm, almost pulsing. You close your eyes. Somewhere beneath your feet, the kiln sleeps, the pigments dreaming of light. You imagine all the colors buried here, waiting, patient, eternal. And you wonder if the desert is still painting, grain by grain, every night when no one's watching. The horizon hums softly. A single shooting star streaks across the indigo sky, leaving a faint blue afterglow. You smile. Maybe that's what ancient painters were really chasing. The kind of color that refuses to fade, even when the gods have forgotten their names. And as you turn back toward the campfire glow, the sand glitters faintly underfoot, each grain catching starlight like powdered pigment. Daria's silhouette waits beside the fire, a brush in her hand sketching something against the night. You think it might be the egg, or maybe it's you. Either way, the desert keeps its colors close, and tomorrow it might just show you how light itself was trapped in stone. The desert doesn't wake so much as exhale. You rise before the light does, feeling the chill of pre-dawn press through your clothes. The sky is the color of old parchment, blank and waiting. The fire from last night is a memory of warmth, and beside it Daria is already awake, because of course she is. She's squinting toward the mountain in the distance, her hair tangled by wind, her notebook open and fluttering like a restless bird. You follow her gaze. Gable Barkal looms against the paling sky, massive, dark, and perfectly shaped, like a crown pressed into the horizon, the holy mountain of ancient Napata, the one every map whispers about. Its cliff face glows faintly even before the sun finds it, as though it remembers every dawn that's ever touched it. Daria stretches her arm toward it, that familiar spark in her eyes. There, she murmurs. That's where the real story sleeps. You smirk. I was hoping the real story involved breakfast. You'll get both, she says. If we don't get lost in a royal tomb first. You grin, half excitement, half dread. The last time you crawled into a tomb, you accidentally sneezed on a mummy, and Daria still calls it the curse of allergies. The two of you pack up camp quickly. The desert wind nips at your ankles, carrying the faint smell of ash and cold sand. The sky warms from ivory to rose. As you walk toward Gebel Barkal, each step feels like it's leading into someone's memory. The climb isn't hard, but it's steady, and the air thins around you. From below, the mountain seemed gentle. Up close, it's a beast. The cliff rises sheer, glowing with bands of red and gold sediment that shimmer under the first light. You can see the faint outlines of ancient carvings half erased by time, rams, suns, and royal cartouches. Daria stops suddenly. Look! You follow her pointing finger to a hollow at the base of the cliff. Say it's small, barely a shadow between rocks, but the air drifting out of it feels cool, even fragrant. An entrance? You ask. She nods. If it's what I think it is, this could be one of the Napatan burial shafts. Maybe even part of the royal necropolis. You crouch near the opening, peering into darkness. It smells of limestone and dust and something faintly sweet, like dried flowers. The kind of scent that lingers after incense, not quite gone. After you, Daria says with mock chivalry. Right, you sigh. If I don't come back, name a sandwich after me. Deal, she grins. The tomb toasty. You lower yourself inside, boots scraping against rock. The air grows cooler immediately. The light from the surface slants down in narrow beams, picking out motes of dust that hang like tiny golden insects. The tunnel widens after a few meters. The walls bear faint murals, still visible under centuries of decay. You run your fingers along the paint, ochre faded blue, and a streak of green still clinging like a stubborn vine. You whisper, "These colors survived the kiln's fire, and now they've survived the sand." Daria's voice echoes softly behind you. Maybe the desert doesn't destroy anything. It just waits. You both fall silent, letting that thought linger. The only sounds are your breaths and the faint tap of pebbles shifting underfoot. As you move deeper, the corridor slopes downward. You pass through chambers small enough to force you to crouch, walls lined with carved falcons and the faint outlines of royal crowns. The light from Daria's lantern flickers, dancing across faces that seem to blink when you're not looking. "Did you know," she says quietly, "that Gebel Barkal was believed to be the dwelling place of Amun himself? The pharaohs came here to prove they were chosen by the god. This mountain was the Axis Mundi, the center of heaven and earth." You whistle softly. "So, ancient Wi-Fi hotspot for divine approval," she snorts. "Basically." You stop when the passage opens into a chamber. It's tall and quiet, shaped like a lotus bud, petals of stone curving upward toward a ceiling blackened by soot. The walls gleam faintly, covered in carvings of processions, priests, chariots, and one enormous ram-headed figure painted in ochre and gold. At the center stands a sarcophagus. It's massive, carved from dark granite, its lid half shifted by centuries of tremors. Dust pools around it in pale drifts. You approach slowly, your footsteps sounding impossibly loud in the hush. "Daria," "I see it," she whispers. You both kneel beside it. The lid is etched with hieroglyphs, smooth and deep. She traces a few with her flashlight. "Royal titulary. This might belong to one of the Napatan kings, maybe even Piye." You blink. Piye, the Kushite king who conquered Egypt in the 8th century BCE, uniting the lands of the Nile once more. You remember his stela, the boastful yet poetic inscriptions about his victory, his divine right. "That's major history," you murmur. She nods. "If it really is his tomb, this could rewrite parts of the Napatan map." You can't help yourself. "So casual day then." She chuckles, shaking her head. "You realize what you're standing next to, right?" "Yep. The world's most intimidating nap chamber." You brush dust from the edge of the sarcophagus. A thin crack runs along one side, and through it you glimpse something. A shimmer of color, faint but unmistakable. "Light," you whisper. "Paint," Daria breathes. There's pigment inside. Carefully, you wedge a small brush into the crack, just enough to widen the view. The lantern light glints on something inside. Fragments of painted plaster, perhaps part of a mural that once lined the chamber walls before collapsing inward. Daria kneels closer. "See that blue? That's Egyptian blue, one of the oldest synthetic pigments ever made. The one they cooked in furnaces." "Exactly. Made from quartz, copper, and calcium. The world's first man-made color." You stare, mesmerized. The shade is deep and luminous, like water frozen in stone. It's astonishing to think that people 2,700 years ago created this hue, on purpose, and it's still glowing. You whisper, "It looks alive." She nods. "That's the thing about Egyptian blue, it's photoluminescent. Even under infrared light it glows. In a way it still remembers the sun." You glance around the chamber, the quiet pressing close. "So we're literally surrounded by light that doesn't know it's dead. Kind of poetic, isn't it? Kind of creepy too." Your laughter echoes softly, swallowed by the stone. As you explore further, you find a small niche carved into the wall, a recess holding a fragment of relief. A hand, open, palm up, offering what looks like a lotus or perhaps an ostrich egg. You feel a jolt of recognition, Daria murmurs. "They used the same symbol here, rebirth." "Maybe it's a sign," you say. "A trail of color leading us through time." She smiles faintly. "Or maybe the artists just liked consistency." You crouch lower. The stone beneath your fingers is cool, slightly damp. You smell limestone and something earthy, old, like the air before a rainstorm. The light from the lantern makes every dust mote sparkle. Then faintly you hear it, a low rhythmic flutter. Not wind, not footsteps, just the faint trembling hum that you first felt back in the kiln, a kind of living silence. You and Daria exchange glances. "Do you hear that?" She nods slowly, "Like wings." It fades as quickly as it came, but the hairs on your arms stay raised. You both stand very still. Maybe it's the acoustics, maybe it's imagination. Or maybe, just maybe, the gods of Napata aren't quite done watching their tomb. You move deeper past the sarcophagus into a smaller tunnel at the rear. It's narrow, carved with rougher hands, unfinished. The air thickens. The walls glitter faintly, tiny specks of mica reflecting the lantern glow. Daria stops abruptly. Wait, do you smell that? You inhale. It's faint, but they're resin, frankincense, maybe even honey. They sealed something here, she says. You kneel and brush at the floor until your fingers find a thin seam, stone meeting stone. A trapdoor. You look at her. Shall we? She hesitates, then smiles wryly. After you, Tomb Toasty. Together you pry it open. A gust of cool air sighs upward, and for a heartbeat the lantern flickers as if the tomb itself just breathed. Beneath lies another chamber, smaller, darker. You lower yourself down. The air is dry and sweet, ancient. The floor gleams faintly. It takes your eyes a moment to adjust before you realize what you're standing among. Dozens of painted ostrich eggs, each one whole, uncracked, arranged in a perfect spiral across the chamber floor. Their surfaces gleam under the lantern light, painted with stars, rivers, and wings. So it's as if you've stepped into the sky's reflection, Daria whispers. Oh, my God, you barely breathe. It's like they buried the universe. You kneel, touching one gently. The paint is cool, flawless. The patterns shimmer faintly under the light, as though glowing from within. This, Daria murmurs, must have been a royal offering, a symbolic rebirth for the pharaoh surrounded by the sky itself. You nod, barely able to speak. The hush here feels different, alive somehow. After a while, she crouches beside you. You know, historians still debate why Gebel Barkal's tombs had such unique decorations. Some think they reflect Nubian cosmology. Others say they represent the merging of Egyptian and Kushite beliefs. You whisper, or maybe it's just what they saw when they dreamed. She smiles softly. Maybe so. The two of you sit there, surrounded by ancient color while the lantern flickers. The light moves across the eggs, making the painted stars seem to pulse and breathe. You can almost imagine the artisans sealing this place, placing the eggs one by one, whispering prayers for light, for return, for eternity. The silence feels thick with memory. Then somewhere above, a faint rumble, just the mountain shifting its weight after centuries. Dust trickles down, shimmering like gold powder. You and Daria glance up, hearts beating faster. But the sound fades again into quiet. The mountain exhales once more. You let your breath out slowly, laughing under it. So, breakfast and a royal tomb. Not bad for a Thursday? She grins, shaking her head. You're impossible. You lean back against the wall, lantern light washing over you both. The painted eggs gleam softly at your feet. The air hums with old color, patient and eternal. And as you close your eyes, you feel it again. That low vibration beneath the rock. Like wings folding in sleep. When you open them, Daria's staring toward the tunnel's far end, where a faint glimmer flickers deep in the dark. Not blue this time. Something warmer, gold. You both rise slowly. Tomorrow, she whispers. We follow that light. The glow deep in the tunnel flickers again, faint but purposeful, like a breath drawn by something ancient that refuses to fade. You lower your head, the torchlight dancing across carvings that shimmer with mica dust, and follow the curve of the passage downward. The air grows cooler, heavy with age and that sweet chalky scent of minerals meeting moisture. Daria walks ahead of you, her steps muffled on the sand. She's got that look again. Part scientist, part sleep-deprived philosopher. You feel that? She whispers, brushing her hand along the wall. It's like the stone's still humming. You nod, and it's true. The vibration is faint, almost below hearing, a low thrum that feels alive in your fingertips. You joke softly. Probably the world's oldest bass line, and she gives a quiet laugh that bounces off the walls like a bird's call trapped in amber. When the corridor opens up, you find yourselves standing inside what can only be called a chapel. The ceiling arches high, carved from solid rock, and the walls gleam faintly in gold blue and black. Feathers, hundreds of them, painted, carved, and inlaid into the stone, all pointing upward toward the ceiling, as if 1,000 invisible wings once lifted this chamber toward the sun. The air is cool enough that your breath ghosts in front of you. You can smell sand, soot, and something faintly metallic, like old coins and rain on bronze. Daria raises the torch higher, and that's when you see the mural. A procession of falcon-headed figures moves along the wall, their wings half spread, their eyes inlaid with tiny chips of lapis. One figure stands apart, taller, crowned, holding an ostrich feather against its chest. "That's Mahat," Daria whispers, reverent. The goddess of truth. You can almost hear her voice layering over the stillness, explaining how the ancient Nubians merged Egyptian gods with their own, how the falcon of Horus and the sun god of Napata became one divine symbol. "They called it the winged sun," she says softly. "For them, the gods didn't just fly across the sky. They were the sky," you smile, whispering, "That's poetic. You sure you're not secretly an art historian?" "Don't tempt me," she says, her grin flickering in the light. As you move closer, your torch catches on something unusual. A feather carved deeper than the others, etched with spiraling script. The letters shimmer like they've been oiled. Daria leans in. "It's Old Meroitic," she murmurs. "I can't read it all, but it mentions the breath of the falcon." You both fall silent. The low hum in the rock seems to grow stronger. Somewhere, faintly, sand trickles down like a soft hourglass, reminding you that the earth is still breathing around you. Then, without warning, there's a sound. Not loud, but unmistakable. A flute-like tone rising and falling, like someone exhaling through hollow bone. You glance toward Daria. "That wasn't you, right?" She shakes her head slowly. "Nope, definitely not me." You turn toward the mural again. The feathers seem to shimmer slightly, as though catching light that isn't there. You half joke, "Okay, so either that's ancient resonance, or we've got the world's oldest karaoke ghost." She snorts. "If the falcon god starts singing back up, I'm quitting archaeology." Still, the sound persists. It echoes through the chamber, weaving with the hum of the stone, low and hypnotic. You take a step closer, tracing your hand along the carved feathers. The surface feels warm, not hot, just alive, like skin beneath sunlight. Daria steadies the torch and the two of you stare as a faint shimmer begins to move along the wall. Dust motes swirl, forming patterns of wings, eyes, and light. It's not movement exactly, more like the afterimage of flight captured in the pigments themselves. You whisper, "You're seeing that too, right?" Daria exhales. "Yeah, either that or we've both officially lost it." The shimmer fades, leaving only quiet. You both stand still, hearts sinking to the slow pulse of the earth. The silence afterward feels heavier, like waiting between two breaths. To break the tension, you mutter, "You know Netflix's next big hit, Falcon Ghost Hunters of Nubia." Daria laughs, the sound soft but grounding. "Only if you're the one holding the EMF detector." You grin, but inside there's a strange ache, that electric awareness that you've brushed against something sacred. The murals here aren't just art, they're memory, pigment and echo fused into one living archive. You kneel beside a small alcove, noticing something lodged in the sand. Carefully you brush it free, a carved bead shaped like a feather, made from what looks like faience. Its surface glows faintly blue, the same hue as the pigment in Pie's tomb above. Daria peers over your shoulder. That's ancient glasswork, possibly votive, or part of a necklace offering. You roll it gently between your fingers. "You think it's still got the falcon's blessing?" She smirks. "Only if it tweets." You tuck the bead safely into your pack, though something about it seems to hum faintly against your palm, almost like it's remembering where it came from. Further inside, the corridor narrows again, leading toward a small chamber partially collapsed by time. The air here tastes different, damper, almost metallic like the inside of a temple bell. You duck beneath a fallen lintel and step into a room smaller than the last, lit only by the flicker of your torch. The walls here are different, less polished, more intimate. The feathers give way to painted scenes, men and women kneeling before winged gods holding ostrich eggs aloft. Their faces are serene, painted in ochre and gold. Between them, a large sun disk hovers, its rays ending in small hands reaching down to touch the offerings. Daria kneels beside one of the figures. "This is late Napatan style," she murmurs, "probably around the reign of Taharka. See how the pigments are layered? They used crushed hematite for the red and powdered malachite for green." You whistle softly. "That's some serious ancient chemistry." "Yeah," she says, tracing the pigment. "They basically made immortality with dirt." You both laugh quietly, but then her tone softens. Historians still debate how much Egyptian influence truly shaped Nubian religion. "But the art here," It's not imitation. It's translation. They made it their own. You nod, letting that thought settle like dust in your chest. You can almost imagine the artists working by firelight, the smell of resin and stone, the rhythmic scrape of brushes made from reeds. Outside, the wind would have sung across the dunes like distant flutes. The faint hum returns, pulsing through the walls again. You both look up. This time, the vibration forms a pattern. Short, long, short. Almost rhythmic, like language made of sound. You whisper, "Maybe that's the feathered gods saying hello." Daria raises an eyebrow. "Or maybe it's just wind resonance." You grin. "Yeah, but wind resonance doesn't sell museum tickets." You stand there for a while listening. The hum fades into the distant sound of dripping water. Slow, steady, like time itself counting heartbeats. The air grows colder. You feel goosebumps crawl up your arms. Something catches your eye. A faint outline on the floor, a circle carved into the stone. You kneel and brush away dust. Here's another spiral, like the one made by the painted eggs. Only this time it's carved directly into the rock, filled with tiny fragments of shell. Daria gasps softly. "That's incredible." The spiral of rebirth again. You glance up at her. "You think this connects to the tomb above?" She nods slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the heart of it. The idea that life itself loops like the flight of a bird." You let your fingers trace the spiral. The shell fragments glint faintly in the torchlight, reflecting tiny arcs of color. Red, blue, gold, white. They look like a broken constellation. Then, from somewhere deep in the corridor behind you, comes a low, resonant cry. Not human, not wind, something in between. It echoes once, twice, and then fades into stillness. You and Daria freeze. You whisper, "Okay." "That was new," she whispers back. "Falcon ghost?" You grin nervously. "If it asks for birdseed, we're leaving." But the sound doesn't return. Only the faint trickle of sand, the slow exhale of the tomb itself. The tension dissolves, replaced by that same strange reverence. You can feel it now, this place breathing, remembering, waiting. Daria lowers the torch to the spiral again. The flame flickers and dances, and for a split second, the shells seem to glow from within, pale as moonlight. You blink and it's gone. She exhales slowly. "You feel like we're being watched?" You nod. "Yeah, but not in a creepy way, more like the museum guards of the afterlife are clocking in." She chuckles softly, shaking her head. "So you'd make a terrible priest." "Yeah," you say, "but a great night shift tour guide." You both sit there, backs against the wall, just listening. The air hums, the torch cracks, and the murals shimmer faintly in the shifting light. The silence grows thicker, comforting, like being wrapped in ancient velvet. And then, for the briefest moment, you swear you can hear wings, soft, distant, beating just once somewhere deep within the stone. The sound fades as quickly as it came, leaving a single feather drifting through your mind's eye, glowing blue like Pi's pigment, like light that refuses to die. You and Daria exchange a glance, both too quiet to break the spell. Somewhere far above, dawn must be creeping toward the cliffs of Gabel Barkle. Down here, though, time has forgotten how to move. You lean your head back against the stone, eyes half closed, the hum still whispering through the chamber, an echo from the feathered gods, reminding you that in this place even silence has wings. And as you drift toward the edge of sleep, a soft draft moves through the corridor ahead, carrying with it the scent of myrrh and something faintly metallic, like wet feathers. Whatever waits in the next chamber isn't done speaking yet. The air shifts again, faint but real, as if something far older than breath has just exhaled. You and Daria rise from the wall where you'd been sitting, your torchlight shaking slightly, scattering orange ripples across the murals. The hum fades, but the silence left behind is somehow louder. You take a step forward into the corridor that waits beyond. The tunnel bends downward, steep and narrow, like a throat swallowing light. The air smells faintly of salt now, salt and resin, maybe the ghost of seawater long gone. Daria notices it too. "That's odd," she whispers. "We're hundreds of miles from the Red Sea." You grin. "Maybe the feathered gods had beachfront property." She rolls her eyes. "If this ends with us finding an ancient surfboard, I'm publishing first." The joke steadies the mood, but something deeper stirs beneath it. A feeling that you're walking not into a tomb anymore, but into a memory. The torch flickers. Shadows stretch and flutter across the carved walls like wings taking flight. The passage opens again, and the space feels immediately different, larger, warmer. The walls here curve outward, and the floor dips slightly, forming a shallow basin filled with sand. You can hear faint wind, not from outside, but somewhere within the rock sighing in slow rhythmic bursts. It almost sounds like the sea. Daria kneels and brushes her fingers across the sand. "See that?" she says softly. "Shell dust. Real marine sediment. You blink. So this place was underwater. Once," she says. "Long before the kings of Napata. When Gabel Barkal was still part of the great river delta before the sands took it. You kneel beside her, and the air feels cooler near the ground. You catch the faint smell of brine, old wood, something resinous like ancient tar. For a second, you almost imagine the ceiling overhead shifting like waves. Then you notice it, carved along the curve of the wall, a procession of ships, dozens of them, etched with fine precision. Sails flared, oars out, banners fluttering. The hulls gleam faintly with inlaid copper. "Look at that," Daria breathes. "The Kushite trade fleets. The ones that went north along the Nile and then east to Punt." You nod slowly, tracing a finger along one ship's hull. So this wasn't just a tomb, it was a memory vault. A map of what they wanted to remember, or who they wanted to join, she murmurs. The light plays over the carvings, making the waves seem to move, the sails puffing with ghostly wind. The longer you stare, the more you can almost hear it. The creak of ropes, the slap of water, the cry of seabirds that haven't flown this far inland in millennia. Daria looks at you, smiling faintly. "You're hearing it too, aren't you?" "Yeah," you say quietly. "Either that or I'm having the world's slowest heat stroke." She chuckles. "Let's go with divine auditory hallucination. Sounds classier." The air shifts again, and for a second you swear the sand ripples, not from your movement, but from a gust that rises from somewhere deep beneath the chamber. The wind hums through cracks in the stone, carrying with it a sound like distant chanting, faint and melodic. You both listen. It's not quite music, not quite whispering, just enough pattern to make your spine tingle. Then Daria points. There, near the center. You follow her gaze. In the middle of the basin, half buried in sand, lies a rectangular stone chest, smaller than a sarcophagus, but carved with intricate spirals. Its lid is cracked slightly open, and faint blue light leaks through the seam. "Well," you murmur. "That's not ominous at all," Daria smirks. "You volunteering to open it?" "Absolutely not," you say, stepping closer anyway. The stone hums faintly beneath your fingers. It's warm. The blue glow flickers like a candle trapped beneath glass. Carefully, the two of you ease the lid aside, sand spilling into the crevice as it shifts. Inside lies something simple and beautiful. A clay jar sealed with wax and twine, painted with a ring of feathers circling its belly. The feathers gleam faintly in the torchlight, each one a different color, like a captured rainbow dulled by time. Daria leans in. "That's incredible. You see that red pigment, cinnabar, and that green malachite. These were luxury imports. Some of that came from as far as Spain." You whistle softly. "So this was global trade before global trade was cool." She grins. "Exactly. Nubia was the crossroads of everything. Ivory, incense, gold, lapis, even elephants. Historians still debate whether some of the war elephants Hannibal used were bred from these lines." You nod, still staring at the jar. "Trade winds of memory," you whisper. "That's what this is, the world's first souvenir shop for eternity." She laughs gently. "Only yours would have a gift receipt." The humor fades into quiet reverence as she brushes away more sand. Beneath the jar lies a piece of linen, so fine it looks almost translucent. On it, faintly painted, are shapes, curved sails, coiling waves, and above them a single falcon with outstretched wings. "Looks like a map," you murmur. "Or a prayer," she says. "To guide souls across the sea of time." You both stare at it for a while, the air thick with that same faint ocean scent. Your torchlight flickers, and the blue glow from the jar pulses once, twice, like a heartbeat. Then a whisper, so faint you almost think it's wind. "Ah, Nehu. Peret." You freeze. "Please tell me that was your stomach." Daria swallows. "That was not my stomach." You exchange looks, equal parts alarm and awe. The whisper fades, leaving behind the soft hiss of shifting sand. To break the tension, you murmur, "So, ancient ghosts with multilingual settings." She smirks weakly. "Yeah, great. We're bilingual cursed now." Still, curiosity wins over fear. You lift the jar carefully. Its weight surprisingly heavy for clay. The base bears an engraving, a falcon perched atop a coiled wave. Beneath it, faint Meroitic symbols shimmer in gold. Daria pulls out her notebook, sketching furiously. If I'm right, this inscription's referencing the trade route between Napata and Punt, the land of incense. There's a myth that the pharaohs of Kush once sent offerings to the gods there, not just goods. You tilt your head. Offerings like... She glances up, a mischievous grin breaking through. Feathers, colors, maybe even songs. They believed wind itself could carry messages to the afterlife. You pause. So basically ancient airdrop. She laughs, loud and genuine this time. The sound fills the chamber, bouncing off the walls like warmth breaking through cold stone. For a moment, everything feels alive again. The colors, the air, even the sand. It's as if the room is exhaling, the ancient winds returning to tell their story one last time. You both pack up the find carefully, wrapping the jar in linen and tucking it into your satchel. The faint glow continues, pulsing gently against the fabric like a firefly trapped in sleep. When you stand, you notice something new on the wall behind you, a line of script illuminated by your torch. It's carved shallowly, the letters half-worn but still legible enough to make Daria pause. It's a hymn, she whispers, tracing the line. When the trade winds sleep, memory sails. You both stand silent for a long moment. The phrase lingers, haunting and soft. Then you hear it again. That faint hum, deeper this time, almost like the sea breathing against the walls. It swells and fades in rhythm, and you realize it's the same pulse as the jar's glow. You and Daria exchange glances. Heartbeat? You suggest. Or tide, she murmurs. Maybe both. You both turn toward the tunnel's far end where the air seems to shimmer faintly, a soft breeze flowing inward, not out. The wind carries with it a scent of something unmistakable. Incense and lotus, sweet, floral, alive. Daria exhales. You smell that? Yeah, you whisper. Something's awake. The torch flickers again, and for just a moment the murals of ships seem to stir. Sails swelling, oars dipping, falcons gliding overhead. Then the flame steadies and it's gone. Daria whispers, "Do you ever feel like we're not discovering these things? They're discovering us?" You smile faintly. Yeah, and we're just pretending to be in charge. The breeze grows a little stronger, brushing past your face like a cool hand. It carries with it the faintest sound, the cry of a falcon echoing down the corridor. You both turn toward the sound. The tunnel ahead yawns open again, the glow of the jar pulsing brighter now, as if urging you onward. Ready? Daria asks softly. You nod. As I'll ever be. You step forward, the air cooling around you, the scent of salt and incense blending into something almost like home. Behind you, the wind sighs once more, brushing sand across the carvings, erasing, renewing, remembering. And as you disappear into the next passage, you swear you can still hear the echo of waves, soft and patient, carrying whispers of feathers and gods across the sea of stone. Somewhere ahead, the wind shifts again, not the breath of the tomb this time, but the first stirrings of something alive, something waiting to rise with dawn. The passage narrows until you have to tilt your torch sideways, shoulder-brushing limestone that sighs faintly with every step. The air thickens here, warm, resin-scented, sticky like breath held for centuries. The faint cry of the falcon fades behind you, replaced by the low hum of something round rolling somewhere ahead. Daria freezes mid-step. You both exchange a glance that says, "Please tell me that's not another jar doing cardio." You duck under a jagged arch, boots sinking into powdery dust so soft it feels like ash. The light flickers, and there it is, a single ostrich egg resting on a shallow altar of black stone. It's not broken, not buried, not even dusty. Just sitting there as if someone set it down yesterday and said, "All right, don't move. I'll be right back," and then forgot for 2,000 years. The surface glows faintly under your torchlight. Not gold, not white, but something like candle flame trapped inside shell. You lean closer. The egg's surface is covered in tiny painted feathers, so delicate they shimmer when you breathe near them. Blues and reds chase each other in spirals, forming wings that seem to lift and curl. "Okay," Daria whispers. "This feels like the part of the movie where the archaeologist ignores every red flag." "Yeah," you murmur. "But also the part where they find out the flag is the treasure. The two of you stand there, listening. The silence hums. The egg hums. Somewhere deeper in the stone, a hollow echo returns your pulse like sonar. You reach out. The air feels warmer close to it, like exhaled breath. And then, as your finger almost touches the shell, you catch a scent. Lotus and charred linen, mixed with something oddly sweet. Daria mutters, "Smells like ancient dessert," and immediately ruins the tension. "Maybe it's custard for gods," you whisper. "Still fresh." She snorts, which echoes embarrassingly loud in the sacred quiet. You study the pedestal. Symbols curve around it, hieroglyphs and Meroitic script interwoven like a conversation. The topmost line reads something that even your rusty hieroglyphics can manage. "The egg that carries dawn." You let that hang in the air. It's beautiful, sure. But also, what does that mean? Daria crouches beside you, brushing sand away from the base. "You know," she says softly, "they used to believe the world was born from an egg." You blink. "Like cosmic omelet?" She grins. "Pretty much. The god Ra was said to rise from a primordial egg, floating on the waters of chaos. But this feels different. The feathers look Nubian, not Egyptian." You tilt the torch. True enough. The feathers spiral into a design you recognize from earlier murals, wings of Amun's sacred geese. You whisper, "It's like someone tried to paint creation back into the world." And that's when you notice it. The egg isn't solid. There's a faint seam, a thin line circling its middle, like it was once meant to open. You slide a finger across the edge. The texture changes. Smooth shell, then something brittle, almost metallic. A hinge? You glance at Daria. "So, what's the archaeology-approved stance on opening cosmic breakfast?" "Strongly discouraged," she deadpans. "But since you're already cursed, might as well go 2 for 1. You both laugh, nervous, low but real. And then you push. The top half shifts. A dry pop. A whisper of dust. Inside. Light. Not torchlight, not reflection, but its own faint glow like moonlight preserved in liquid. At first you think it's water. Then you realize it's pigment. Deep ultramarine blue swirling in a thin layer at the base. Veins of gold dust tracing constellations above it. Tiny symbols float like stars in motion. It's not just a relic. It's a map. The ostrich egg is a globe of memory, painted with rivers, dunes, mountain ridges, and trails that stretch south into lands older than any empire. You whisper, "It's the Nile," but not as it is, maybe as it was. Daria breathes. Or as they dreamed it. The air thickens with incense again. You realize the smell isn't coming from the walls, it's coming from the open egg. Every breath feels warmer, softer. You almost think you hear a voice, faint and melodic. Humming through your chest. "Historians still debate," Daria says quietly, eyes still locked on the egg, "why so many Nubian tombs have incomplete burials. Some think they were interrupted by war, others by drought. But maybe," she gestures at the glowing map, "maybe they meant to leave something unfinished, so the world could keep dreaming." You smile faintly. "That's the kind of theory that gets you tenure and a Netflix special." She nudges you, and gets you to shut up for once. You both laugh again, softly this time. The laughter feels out of place, but somehow needed, a small rebellion against centuries of silence. Then, from the other side of the chamber, you hear a sound, like a gust of sand, or wings brushing stone. You turn your torch. Nothing moves, but the shadows tremble. The air shifts again. Cooler now. The scent fades, and from behind the pedestal, half buried in dust, something glints, bronze and glassy. You brush it free. It's a small amulet shaped like an eye, but not the usual eye of Horus you've seen carved everywhere. This one is inverted, as if looking inward, not outward. Daria leans in. "That's unusual," you nod. "Yeah, feels like it's watching memory itself." You tuck it into your pouch, ignoring how warm it feels against your palm. The torch sputters. Shadows crawl up the walls, wrapping the egg in darkness except for the faint internal glow that refuses to die. It pulses once, twice, then steadies. You both sit. For a moment, you just listen. There's a rhythm beneath the silence, soft, steady, like waves pulling at sand. It's the same sound you heard earlier in the basin room, the heartbeat of trade winds, the ghost of sails. You whisper, "It's still moving." Daria frowns. "The egg?" "No, the world inside it." She looks at you with the kind of expression that means you're probably right, and I kind of hate that you're probably right. You smile tiredly. Tilt your head back against the cool stone and close your eyes. You can almost see the Nile flowing in the dark, ships moving slowly down the painted water inside that egg, carrying prayers, colors, and maybe even laughter. A faint breeze touches your face. It smells like lotus and silt, the kind of scent that doesn't belong underground. You open your eyes. The air shimmers faintly, as if sunlight just passed through water. The torchlight bends. The egg hums again. You whisper, "You feel that?" Daria nods, eyes wide. "It's like..." It's remembering. The shimmer deepens. For one dizzy second, you swear you see a figure in the glow, a woman draped in white feathers, holding an egg in both hands, eyes closed as if whispering a prayer. Then she's gone. You both sit perfectly still, afraid to break whatever thread just passed through the room. Finally, Daria exhales. "Well," she says softly, "add ghost poultry goddess to the list." Right after ancient karaoke ghosts. "Yeah," you whisper, smiling. You both sit a little longer, not out of fear, but reverence. The air feels alive. The walls seem to breathe with you. The painted egg glows faintly between you like a nightlight for forgotten gods. Somewhere above, faint vibrations tremble through the floor. The rumble of desert wind, or maybe a storm rolling down from the mountain. The same wind that once carried ships down the Nile, bearing ostrich feathers, gold dust, and painted shells across empires. You wonder if that's what the egg remembers, the constant movement, the long trade of dreams and sand. You think of all the eggs that were buried, sealed in tombs, lost in dunes, and this one, the one that never was, a survivor or perhaps a messenger, and suddenly you understand why it still hums, because some stories aren't meant to rest. They stay unburied, so someone, someday, will hear them again. You smile faintly, eyes half closed. As the torch dims and the hum deepens, Daria leans her head back against the wall, whispering, "Promise me we're not bringing that thing to camp." "No promises," you murmur, voice drifting between sleep and sand. And as the final ember of your torch dies, the egg glows once more. Gentle, golden, eternal, like the first sunrise waiting just beneath the surface of the world. You can almost hear wings beating above, a call somewhere between wind and voice. It sounds less like farewell, more like invitation, and in that faint light, you realize the next step doesn't lead deeper, and it leads back toward the dawn. When the torch finally dies, the dark doesn't feel hostile. It feels patient. The glow from the egg fades to a whisper of gold, just enough to sketch the edges of the chamber. You and Daria sit in that warm half-light, listening to the pulse that still trembles faintly in the air, like the Earth's own slow heartbeat. Then, somewhere far above, there's a soft crack. Stone settling, the echo ripples down like a sigh. And with it, a breeze. You almost don't believe it at first. But yes, cool air, drifting in through unseen cracks, carrying a trace of dust and sunlight. The scent isn't tomb-like at all. It smells of acacia bark, hot sand and faint sweetness. The unmistakable breath of desert morning. Daria murmurs, "We're not supposed to smell outside from inside." You grin, voice low. "Maybe the desert just opened a window for us." She gives you a side glance. "A window? In a tomb?" "Sure," you whisper. "An ancient skylight. Very eco-friendly." She laughs softly, the sound tiny but alive in the chamber's hollow lungs. The breeze stirs again, stronger now. The egg flickers once more, as if acknowledging the change, and then settles into stillness. You stand brushing dust from your clothes. The floor feels different beneath your boots. Grainy, looser. Sand has begun trickling in from a seam in the wall, bright as powdered sunlight. You look at Daria. Exit strategy? She tilts her head. Or invitation. Either way, you start digging. The work is slow, the air thin, but there's rhythm to it. Sand sliding, breath sinking with motion. You half expect some mummy to file a noise complaint. Instead, after several minutes, your hand breaks through into open air. Light pours in. Not the sterile beam of flashlights. Real light. Morning light. You crawl upward through a narrow crevice until you emerge onto a ledge of rock, overlooking a desert so calm it looks painted. The horizon glows pale rose. Dunes stretch like frozen waves. The air feels cool and impossibly clean after so long underground. You breathe deeply and almost laugh. Daria clambers out behind you, blinking against the dawn. Her hair's streaked with dust, her face glowing in the early light. "We made it," she whispers, then adds, "Or we're dead and this is the prettiest afterlife ever." "Same thing," you murmur. Stretching your arms, the wind brushes your face again, gentle, dry, and soft as silk. It makes a faint tone as it passes through cracks in the rock, almost like a flute. The same pitch you heard in the chamber below. You both pause, listen. The mountain itself seems to breathe. Below you, Gabel Barkal rises in its strange sacred shape. A lion's head if you squint, a guardian if you feel poetic. The cliffs catch fire in the dawn, glowing amber and honey. You can almost sense the buried chambers beneath. Still humming, still waiting. Daria exhales slowly. "So that's what it meant." You glance over. "What?" "The egg that carries dawn." She smiles faintly. "It wasn't about creation. It was about release. Letting light back out." You nod, quietly stunned by how right that feels. You both sit on the ledge for a while, letting the silence do the talking. The wind brushes your clothes, lifts tiny spirals of sand, draws faint shapes across the stone, lines that look like rivers if you let your imagination wander. And of course, yours does. You think about the Nile flowing hundreds of miles north from this very desert, about PA's fleet carrying trade and faith down to Thebes, about ostrich feathers once plucked from birds running free across the savannah, turned into crowns and fans and sacred symbols. You remember reading that when PA conquered Egypt, he didn't destroy its temples. He cleaned them, restored them, fed the gods again. Historians still debate why, whether it was piety or politics. But sitting here, it just feels human. Wanting to keep the world's breath steady, even when kingdoms fall apart. You say that out loud. Daria hums in agreement. "Maybe that's why they buried so much air, so the world could keep breathing." You laugh softly. "That's kind of beautiful. Also very impractical." "Hey," she says, nudging you. "You'd be surprised how long a story can hold its breath." You watch the sun creep higher. Its warmth slides over the desert like a slow tide. Every grain of sand flashes for an instant, and you realize there's no such thing as stillness here. Everything moves just too slowly for eyes to see. The wind picks up, whispering along the ridge. It carries faint sounds, flutes, voices, maybe just your imagination. But then Daria tilts her head. "You hear that?" You nod. "Music?" "Maybe," she smiles faintly. "Or maybe the gods liked our jokes." The laugh that escapes you sounds lighter than it should, like the wind borrowed it. You reach into your pack, fingers brushing the amulet you found, the inverted eye. It feels cool now, almost glassy. When you lift it to the sunlight, its center catches the light and reflects it backward into the sand. The beam cuts across the dunes, landing on a patch far below where the rock flattens into desert plain. Something glints there. Daria squints. "Tell me that's not another entrance." You grin. "You know, I'd love to tell you that, but..." She groans, dragging her hands over her face. "We literally just crawled out of the underworld. And now the underworld's sending a sequel," you say. She glares, then laughs. "You're incorrigible." You shrug. "Blame the wind. It's got good timing." For a while you both just sit there, deciding whether curiosity or exhaustion wins. The wind keeps playing its flute song, patient as eternity. You pull out your canteen and take a sip. The water tastes like metal and time. You hand it to Daria, who drinks, then looks out toward the glint again. "I wonder how many lives pass through here," she says. "Traders, priests, herders, maybe someone just trying to survive the heat. Everyone leaving a trace small enough to disappear." You nod. "But not gone," she smiles. "Not gone." The breeze moves through your hair, light and rhythmic. For a second, you swear you can feel the same current that once filled the sails of PA's ships, that carried incense upriver, that whispered through tombs and temples. You say quietly, "Maybe that's the real treasure." "What?" "The wind that remembers." The words linger. The desert answers with another sigh, warm and endless. Down below, a few faint dust devils twist across the sand. They shimmer in the rising light, like spirits stretching after sleep. One spins near the glinting spot, scattering pebbles, then vanishes. Daria shields her eyes. "You think the egg's still glowing down there?" You smile. "Probably. Maybe it'll keep glowing until someone else finds it in another 1,000 years. She tilts her head. "Do you think they'll make the same jokes?" "Oh, absolutely," you say. "Eternal cosmic omelet. It's timeless comedy." You both laugh again, soft and tired and happy. The sun's full now, heat pooling on your shoulders, but the breeze keeps it bearable. The desert's gentle breath moves around you like an old friend. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling its rhythm. When you open them, the horizon looks different, clearer, more alive. The dunes shimmer as if something underneath is moving, waiting. You think of all the stories buried in this sand, eggs, maps, feathers, gods, and how every grain seems to hold a secret. And maybe that's what Gebel Barkal wanted to teach you all along. Not everything sacred stays sealed. Some things open quietly on their own time. You rise slowly, brushing the sand from your palms. Daria stands beside you, stretching, squinting at the horizon. "So," she says, "one more look?" You grin. "Just to make sure the desert's not trying to call us back." "Yeah," she says softly, "because that would never happen in our line of work." The wind answers with a playful gust, swirling sand around your feet. You both laugh, turn toward the slope, and begin the slow descent. Every step leaves a shallow print, instantly softened by the breeze. The air hums with warmth, and for a moment you almost imagine footsteps beside yours, bare, light, ancient. You don't look back. You don't have to. The mountain glows behind you, golden against the morning, and somewhere deep beneath its shadow, the egg still breathes softly, waiting for another sunrise to pass through it. You whisper to yourself, "We're all just sand and wind, trying to remember our own beginning." Daria glances over. "What was that?" You smile. "Just talking to the desert," she nods. "Did it answer?" You look toward the horizon, where light bends like a mirage and a faint shimmer flickers. Another story waiting to be found. "Yeah," you whisper. It's saying, "Keep listening." And with that you step forward into the sun, the desert's gentle breath carrying your laughter away, toward the glint that waits beyond the dunes. You wake before the sun. Or maybe it's the river that wakes you, a low sigh deep under the skin of the world. The sand is cool against your cheek, and the sky above Gebel Barkal stretches pale and endless, like parchment waiting for the first brush of ink. Daria is still asleep beside the slope, wrapped in her scarf, one hand resting near the small pouch that holds the painted ostrich egg. For a moment you both look like misplaced artifacts, travelers that history accidentally forgot to bury. The wind is soft, warmer than before, and it carries that quiet scent again, lotus and dust, morning dew clinging to stone. Hey Falcon's cry threads the distance, not sharp this time, but slow, drawn out, as if it too is half dreaming. You sit up, rubbing your eyes. The desert is wide awake, yet everything else feels as though it's holding its breath, waiting to see what you'll do next. "Guess the universe didn't bury us after all," you mumble. Stretching your shoulders, Daria stirs, blinking groggily. "No, but it did a fine job of covering us in sand." She shakes her hair free, small grains falling like glitter. "Morning, archaeologist of cosmic omelets." "Morning," you reply, voice rasped and sleepy. "How's our egg doing?" She pats the pouch gently, still humming. "Either it's sacred energy or my phone on silent mode." You laugh under your breath. "If that thing gets Wi-Fi, I'm converting to whatever faith runs on it." It feels good, this lightness after so much stillness. The kind of humor that doesn't chase away mystery, but folds into it like a soft breath. Around you, the dunes begin to blush gold. The sun edges up the horizon, and suddenly, everything is painted, rocks burnished like copper, air shimmering as though laced with invisible silk. You take a deep inhale. The warmth smells like possibility. By the time you and Daria make it down to the base of the cliff, the desert has turned from silver to honey. The ground trembles faintly under the growing heat. Not like an earthquake, more like the land stretching after a long sleep. Each step leaves a print that fills almost instantly with dust. "You know," Daria says, squinting ahead, "historians still debate whether Gebel Barkal was meant to be a symbol of divine kingship or a natural holy site. The rulers just repurposed." You nod. "I get it. Sometimes the world builds the temple first, and people arrive later pretending it was their idea." "Exactly," she smirks. "It's like moving into an apartment already haunted and claiming you're the first tenant." A low chuckle drifts between you. Somewhere far off, a caravan bell jingles. The sound doesn't come from one direction. It rolls like a thought the desert keeps changing its mind about. Then you see it, a thin line of green on the horizon. The Nile. It doesn't shimmer like water should. Instead it glows, calm, wide, almost asleep. A silver ribbon coiled in its cradle of sand, catching the light of a sun that seems reluctant to rise too high. When you reach the riverbank, the world has gone hushed again. The air cools instantly, heavy with moisture, smelling of mud and papyrus and something faintly sweet. Figs, maybe, or crushed reeds. The transition from desert to river always feels like stepping from thought into dream. You kneel at the edge, dip your fingers in. The water is warm, not from heat, but from memory, as though the Nile still remembers every touch, every soul it carried. Ripples spread slowly, circling outward like breaths in meditation. Imagine, Daria murmurs, crouching beside you. 3,000 years ago, someone might have stood in this same spot, touching the same current. You glance at her. Yeah, they probably also complained about sand in their shoes. True, she laughs softly. Some things don't change. You sit together in silence. The river drifts by, thick and slow, its surface scattered with morning insects and the glint of fish scales. The reflection of Gebel Barkal trembles there, a mountain made of shadow and light, watching over the sleeping water. For a while, you just listen. The distant bleat of goats, a paddle hitting wood, the rustle of wind through reeds. It's a soundscape so soft it feels almost designed for relaxation playlists. Then comes something stranger. A shape moves under the surface, not a fish, not a log. It glides, pale and oval, glowing faintly. The water swirls around it. You and Daria both lean forward. Another egg? She whispers. You squint. It's round, smooth, gleaming like moonlight trapped beneath the river. Then it drifts upward, catches the dawn, and you see what it really is, a stone. A carved alabaster stone in the shape of an egg. Its surface is etched with lines like veins or rivers. And in the middle, a faint symbol, almost rubbed away, a lotus. The water slides off it as it rolls gently onto the shore, as if the current itself were returning it to you. You reach out, fingertips brushing the cool surface. It hums and faintly, rhythmically, almost breathing. Daria exhales. Okay, she says slowly. I know it's too poetic, but does it feel like the desert just exhaled that? You nod, voice barely above a whisper. Maybe the river's dreaming. And it just rolled over. She smiles, small and crooked. Then we should probably let it sleep. You place the stone beside the painted egg, and for a heartbeat they seem to pulse together. A rhythm sinks between them, one ancient, one newly found. The air smells sharper, like wet sand and sunlight. Daria crouches closer. Do you hear that? It's faint, but yes, there's sound beneath the hum, like low music. Not from the stone, but from the river itself. The melody is older than instruments, a slow spiraling drone that vibrates in your bones. It reminds you of Nubian chants you once heard in a documentary, the kind of music that could lull both gods and travelers into stillness. You lean back on your elbows, eyes half closing. If lullabies had geography, you say, this would be it. Daria chuckles. And we're the only ones awake to hear it. Lucky us, you murmur. Front row seats to the Nile's nap. A heron glides overhead. Its wings slice the light in silence, shadow rippling across the sand. Somewhere a papyrus boat drifts lazily downriver, a fisherman humming to himself. You watch as he throws his net, the water catching around his arms like strands of glass. The rhythm of the motion, the sound of wet rope, the distant call of a flute. It all folds together, gentle, ancient, patient. You realize this isn't just a landscape. It's a lullaby. And every civilization that lived here must have known it. The Egyptians, the Kushites, even the Romans who came later, all of them paused at this river. Let its rhythm sink into their bones. You remember a story. When the pharaoh Taharka ruled both Egypt and Nubia, he built temples along this stretch of the Nile, believing the river's flow mirrored the breath of the gods. Historians still debate whether he truly thought the water could listen. But looking at it now, you can't imagine otherwise. As the sun climbs higher, heat returns slow and heavy. You both find shade beneath a low acacia tree. The pods rattle gently in the wind like distant beads. Daria pulls a small notebook from her bag, the one she's been sketching in since the expedition began. What are you writing? You ask. She glances up, smiling faintly. Notes, maybe a field report, maybe a poem. Hard to tell the difference anymore. You grin. Academia and poetry. The two ways to make sure no one reads your work, she snorts. Says the person narrating their life like a bedtime story. Touché. You both laugh quietly, and the sound drifts upward into the branches. Bees hum lazily above. The smell of warm resin thickens. For a moment, there's nothing to solve, nothing to dig for. Just the river, the heat, the pulse of the world catching its own breath. Later, when the light softens again, that amber hour when the desert exhales and even shadows look sleepy, you pack up your things. The ostrich egg, the alabaster one, the scroll fragments Daria found. Everything goes carefully into the satchel. As you fasten the clasp, you notice something. The painted egg isn't glowing anymore. It's pale, quiet, ordinary. Daria sees it too. Maybe it used all its light. Or maybe, you say softly, it passed it on. The two of you stand looking out at the Nile. The current is barely moving now, more like a mirror than water. You could swear it's dreaming again. And maybe, you think, that's the point. Every river, every civilization, every story, it all sleeps eventually. But sleep isn't the end. It's just the world remembering how to breathe. You start walking back toward the dunes. The sand sighs beneath your steps. Behind you, the river gleams. Not gold now, but silver, calm, resting. Think we'll ever tell anyone about this? Daria asks. You pause. Maybe one day, when the world feels quiet enough to listen. She nods, eyes on the horizon. Then we'll wait, until the river wakes again. The wind rises, carrying with it the scent of water and sun and something softer, a kind of peace you can almost hear. You close your eyes and for a heartbeat, it feels like the whole desert is breathing with you. A hush settles, warm, complete, and somewhere in that silence, you realize the journey has been circling toward this moment all along. Not discovery, not mystery, but rest. The river sleeps. The sand drifts, and you, for the first time in what feels like forever, exhale. End of script. Sweet dreams.